Right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're going to give a few minutes for people to keep joining and then we will get started. But we are so thankful you guys are here. All right. Perfect. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Kaylee Havens. My co-chair here, Amy Short, will introduce ourselves shortly. We are so thankful you guys have joined us for our second virtual drive-in workshop. We have been co-chairs for 3 years now. Our first year was in person, and then last year was our first attempt at a virtual event. It went really well, was very helpful for many of our schedules, and we had a great turnout. So we're excited to bring this to you again virtually and spend an afternoon just getting invaluable resources from amazing presenters and session hosts. So, as I mentioned, my name is Kaylee Havens. I work here as the college counselor at Kingsridge Christian School. This is my fourth year here on the high school side. Previously, I spent 8 years on the college side at two different institutions. But very thankfully, I have been a part of SACAC since 2015. So, very thankful for everything that this organization brings to both sides of the desk, and events like this where we get to learn from each other and continue to grow in our knowledge. And I'll pass it off to Amy.
Hi, everybody. My name is Amy Short. I'm super excited to be co-hosting this event with Kaylee. I am the district school counseling facilitator in Forsyth County Schools. I have been in this role now for 3 years. This is my third year. Before that, I have been in high school counseling, all in public schools. So I was at South Forsyth High School for several years. Before that, I was at Roswell High School in Fulton County. I'm currently in my 26th year in public school education. And I was introduced to SACAC many years ago by a former lead counselor. And I really, honestly, from the public side, had not heard about SACAC before, but just fell in love with the organization, all of the opportunities for professional development, for networking, connections that I've made. On the college side, and just the stuff I've learned that I've been able to use in supporting students and families through the process for post-secondary stuff has been fantastic. And so we're super excited to have you guys here today. We're really thrilled with all of the speakers today. And we really think you guys are going to love it. So before we get started, as people are joining us, we've told you a little bit about ourselves. So we were hoping you guys could drop in the chat. Let us know where you are coming from within the state, because this is, trying to reach everybody in all corners of Georgia. So drop in the chat where you guys are from, and then also let us know, are you in a public school, a private school? Are you an independent counselor? Are you with a CBO? We would love to see kind of the wide range of people we have on the call today. All right.
Yes. All right. We
Got a
see.
lot of stuff scrolling through. Cobb County, public schools, Forsyth County, Paulding County, and formerly some other public schools around. What else do we
Gwinnett
see?
County, that's where I'm from. Welcome.
Awesome. Clark County. Oh,
IDC
Whitfield
in
County Schools,
Decatur. Hey,
Dolphin.
Jade. Welcome.
Yes. Decatur, APS, Griffin Public Schools, fantastic. More Paulding. Charter School, awesome. Glad to have you. Go Lions. I love it. Some school spirit from Walton County. I feel like we really are reaching like all parts of the state. And I love that we've got charter school people on here. We got IECs. I saw that was like one of the first ones that popped on. There's lots of good stuff like being dropped in here. This is
Amazing.
fantastic. Newton County Schools.
Yes, more Gwinnett. And we'll continue to use the chat throughout the presentation
Absolutely.
today. Webinars do make it to where it's not as interactive. So we'll be utilizing the webinar portion, the chat function, the Q&A portion. So make sure you have access to both of those. And if you do have to step away at any point, you're welcome to. But yeah, keep throwing in where you're from. Keep saying hey to everyone. We can all make it be very exciting for those of us who are virtual and going to SACAC later next month to be able to meet in person. So this is great.
Absolutely. All right, Sarah, we see you. Landmark Christian School in Fairburn. Fantastic. Thank you for joining us. All right, so like Kaylee said, we are going to continue using the chat and get everybody a little bit more engaged. We thought this was a great one to start with. Finish this sentence. The professional skill I wish I learned earlier was. So take a minute maybe to reflect. And then when you've got something, go ahead and drop it in there.
Yes, networking is
Ooh,
huge.
that's a great one. Networking. I don't know about you guys, but I still get intimidated when I go to a college fair and all the tables. Like, I'm
Mhm.
so nervous still to go walk and talk to people. Project management. Oh, Melinda, learning
That's
that it's
big.
not personal. Okay, I like that. Just understanding that people have things to do and there's different people who work different ways. Yes.
Yes, contents and spreadsheets was going to be mine. I think I tell everyone everywhere I meet that I learned how to use Excel the most from Jesse at Woodward, and I still want him to teach a course. He is amazing at it, and I want to know Excel better and wish I had learned it in college before I became a professional. So, spreadsheets, Excel, all the things. I love it.
Yes.
Organization, that's a great one.
Yes. I hear the spreadsheets one keeps coming up. I hear from so many counselors that I support who talk about like, I had no idea that I needed to know anything about like computer science to be able to do my job efficiently, like to be able to know the ins and outs of like how to make tables and do things in Excel. Like that was never part of anything we learned.
Yes.
Um, all right, what else you guys got? What other professional skills?
Keep thinking of them, and we're going to take some of these for potential session ideas in the future. So, little
Absolutely.
win-win on both sides for us. We'll
Yes.
move on to the next one though. So this one, if you have a Mac, it's going to be easy to drop an emoji. If you don't have a Mac, feel free to just Google the emoji you want to drop. But we would love to know from you guys if it is your first time attending this event, and that is since it's been offered. So this is our third year, but we have had these drive-in workshops for many, many years. So drop a thumbs up if this is your first time attending this event. Maybe drop a wave if it is a returning event for you. Welcome, Mackenzie. We're glad to have you. Oh my gosh, so many. We got some returners in there. Melinda, Jade. Hey, Sarah.
Oh, yes. Look at Sarah with all the emojis. Love
Yes.
it. Yay. Awesome, Kara. Joni, thank you. Laura.
And some were get ahead. So if you saw the second question, or if you want to go ahead and find that emoji, if you are going to be attending the SACAC 2026 conference that's coming up next month, please drop a confetti popper here. We would love to see who's going to be there, meet you in person. It's going to be a great time. All right.
Yes. New Orleans calls for celebration. Sebastian's getting ready. Emily's getting ready. Thank you, Tiffany, for joining us. Thank you, Shannon. Absolutely. Some more confetti poppers happening. We're so excited for you guys to be on the call with us today. Little sneak peek. I was previewing some of the presentations, and I was like, yes, oh my gosh, yes, the counselors are going to love this. Oh, this is perfect. Oh, this is perfect. So Kaylee and I are so excited for you guys, and for the presentation, for the presenters that are happening today.
All
Yay,
right.
these are great. Glad to see some new faces and some people that are going to be at SACAC this year. Fantastic. So just wanted to touch base on the meeting norms. Obviously, hopefully you guys are in a space where you're going to be able to really like be present and tuned in and not be distracted too much, which I know is very difficult. When you're in a school building, I texted my team and I was like, I am physically here, but I am not here for the next several hours. So hopefully you are in a space where you're allowed to do something like that, so you can really take it all in and get out of this workshop what you are hoping to get out of it. We've got you guys muted, we think, but Kaylee is the technology one of the duo here. And we are really hoping that we're going to have time for some questions towards the end of each presentation. Our first presenter, Jay, plans to be very interactive. And so there may be times and opportunities to unmute and chime in and stuff like that. But certainly raise your hand towards the end if there's the opportunities for that. We want to make sure you guys are able to get all of your questions answered. But we will, as we go through each session, and Kaylee will talk about this in a minute, have little breaks, little brain breaks in between, little commercials from us, and try to give you a little email break quickly, so you can stay engaged and be present during the presentations. So we're excited.
All right. So just a little overview of what we have for you guys today. And so, you know, when it comes to organizing this, one, we do utilize the sessions that people submit. So that's a little plug to continue submitting sessions. They're really helpful at conferences and different events like this. So as you're going through, if you're like, this would be great for someone to know, make sure you're looking at those emails that get sent out for session proposals because they are utilized. And we also try to make sure that we're finding sessions that aren't giving you the same thing every year, but are kind of switching it up. So in the past, we've offered case studies, we've had financial aid representatives come on and speak. We've done various different panels for different subjects to help understand how you can advise your students. We love bringing in anyone who can touch on the mental health piece, as we know that continues to be an ever evolving topic. So we're really excited today to host these three. We think they're really unique and different from what we've offered in the past. So for those of you who don't know, we'll bring him on in a little bit, but our first session today is going to be through one of our very own. So our two counselors from Westminster are going to kind of do a back and forth panel or presentation, but it is really hosted by Jay McCann, who is co-author of The College Finder alongside Steve Antonoff. And I think this is amazing. So Jay had mentioned when we were talking earlier, it's been about 6 years in the making. But I think it's so amazing that this is one of our very own who's gone through, created this amazing resource that we could all use, whether you're a private, public, CBO, or independent. So we're going to be able to hear some really valuable resources from him there. We will take quick breaks after each session, and we'll probably even take a quick break before we continue on with our first session because it's a long time in front of your computer. So we want to stick with these time frames. So if you want to write these down right now, we will do some little plugs for SACAC, but we will not start until the next session begins to give times for our presenters, but also times for those of you guys that are attending to be able to pop out if needed, grab a snack, grab some water, use the restroom, chat with students. We know that you're super busy and just thankful that you're here with us. We are also recording this event, so this will become available, I believe, within 24 hours of our event ending. I know it's always posted on the SACAC YouTube page and also through the member resources tool, so feel free to always pop in. And if you are not a member, we'll be talking about some of that later on as well. Our second session, starting at 1:55, will be led by Garn. I'm personally a big fan of Garn as I was a part of Garn myself on my college side of the desk. So these are some amazing, amazing individuals who are going to share some expertise of ways that you can partner with them, but also just partner with college reps in general throughout the process. So they're going to be talking about what we wish that you knew. So feedback from college reps on ways that you can partner with them on the high school side. Again, we'll take a quick little 5-minute break, and then we'll continue on with our third session that is hosted by Miss Emma with Therapeutic Recovery Network, focusing on mental health trends and strategies for resilience and coping with transition, specifically with teenagers. So about to do that transition into college. So I know we're really excited with that. Amy has some kids herself who are at that age, and so I know that's a really exciting part to be able to hear from that as well. So as I mentioned, we'll get started pretty close to our time. So as of right now, if you want to make sure you've got everything you need for us to get this kicked off, we'll be starting closer to about 1:05 for our first session. And we're still here to utilize the chat feature. So if you want to pop in anything that you need here, we're here to answer questions. We're here to help you with any technology that you might need. And we will get started right around 1:05 with our first session hosted by Jay. I did have someone reach out asking about how to submit the chat. So if you're new to Zoom or new to a webinar feature, you still have the toolbar and you should see the feature that says chat, different than Q&A. So We may be utilizing Q&A later on. That would be where we actually have you answer a specific question, but you can utilize the chat feature at any point. You can message us as host. You can also message each other, but that feature should just be on your main toolbar. Great question, though. Yes, and we have another question about is if the recording will be sent out in case you have to jump off 100%. So this is being recorded. It's usually available within 24 hours of the event on the SACAC YouTube and then also on the SACAC members page. So the YouTube is always available and then the members page requires membership through SACAC, which we'll talk about in just a little bit, but it will be recorded and will be sent out. Hi, Alex. Welcome. For those of you just tuning in, we are just taking a minute. Our first session will start at 1:05. We want to be really cognizant that this is a very long virtual event, so feel free to take some time, grab water, grab snacks, whatever you need, and we will get started right at 1:05 with our first presenter.
Hey, Candace, I see that your hand is up. Did you have a question or did Kaylee already address it?
I love all the little icebreaker questions, so I'm just going to continue them while we're hanging out. So, from our attendees, if any of you have experience from the college side prior to your current position, we'd love to see you drop some of that information in there. Maybe you're a part of GARN or a college rep for any of the regional networks or even on campus. Feel free to post that into the chat.
Also, while we're waiting, just resource I was thinking about that I'll drop in the chat as well, since I know, like we talked about at the beginning, we're reaching all the corners of Georgia and everywhere in between. Um, for those of you on the call that don't know what GARN stands for, I couldn't remember if you said this at the beginning, Kaylee, or not. GARN stands for Greater Atlanta Regional Network. Network, yes. And serves their representatives that serve obviously like the greater Atlanta area. But Christy Conley, who is former president of SACAC, who also is a public high school counselor, she shared with me another group that serves more uh, supports higher education in rural and small town communities. And it's called the STARS College Network. It's a consortium of 32 top colleges and universities across the US committed to improving access and affordability to higher education for rural and small town students. And so that's another resource for those of you in particular that are maybe in more rural communities and not in the metro Atlanta area. So I will drop in a link to the website in case that's something that might be of interest. They have virtual college fairs and stuff like that. So that might be a resource for some of you guys.
We've got more in here. 10 years in college admissions, fifth year on the high school side of the desk. That is amazing. Welcome. Let's see. So if you're just now joining what we're throwing in the chat, let us know where you're from. So if you're private, public, CBO, independent, we did a thumbs up if this is your first time attending this event, whether in person or virtual. One of the confetti poppers if we will see you in New Orleans for SACAC conference that's coming up in March. And then right now, we're asking if you've been on the college side of the desk, maybe where you're from, what your background has looked like. We had someone who's been in multiple different areas from residence life, enrollment services, disability support, academic advising, wealth of knowledge right there. So that's amazing. And then we do have someone wanting to share a little bit about Georgia Legislative Day. That's tomorrow. So, yes, please, please, please take advantage of that. Anna, if you want to drop in the chat for everyone a link in case they want to register last minute, we would love that as well. And I know Amy dropped in the Stars College Network too. And the last icebreaker that you'll see in there, if you're joining and trying to make sense of what the chat reads, we asked if there is a professional skill that you wish you knew earlier. And we got a lot of people who said networking, spreadsheets was huge, organization. Some people who said there's personal skills they wish they knew, which I think we all have some personal skills we wish we knew earlier. So feel free to utilize that throughout the meeting. Thank you, Anna. So she just dropped in the link for Georgia Legislative Day, also an amazing event hosted through SACAC where you can talk to your representatives alongside getting advice on how to talk to your representatives for helping things from anywhere from caseloads to making sure everyone has equitable resources, need-based financial aid, some awesome, awesome things that you can do through Legislative Day. So if you've never attended, highly, highly encourage you to be a part of that. And the agenda has been dropped in there as well. Thank you, Amy. Anna, I'm sorry. Thank you, Anna. I'm looking at Amy, so. And we'll get started right at 1:05. So again, feel free to take this time. 1:05 will be our first session. Okay, we got another question about recording. So yes, this event will be recorded. It is going to be sent out probably within 24 hours after the event on the SACAC YouTube and also on the members page. What we've been telling everyone, we want to be really cognizant with a virtual event that we don't start early or go past times to make sure if you're following along with the schedule, we know you got kids popping in and out. We know that it's crazy. So we'll be following the timeline you see here. So if you want to write this down, at 1:05, we'll get started with our first session. We will take about 5-minute brain breaks in between each session. We will be on here plugging some SACAC events that are coming up and talking more about those, but you're welcome to take that time to pop out, do whatever you need. Our second session will start at 1:55. That's hosted by Garn. And then we'll do another brain break. And then our final session is at 2:40, hosted by Emma with the Therapeutic Recovery Network. And that'll wrap up our event. But it will all be recorded and then posted for you guys to utilize and share out with anyone that you want to share it with as well. So we are about 10 minutes away from getting started with our first session. We have someone in the chat here, 28 years on the college side, over two schools, and 9 months as an IEC. I love hearing everyone's background because that is just crazy amount of knowledge and wisdom. So thank you guys for joining. Another person in the chat, 10 plus years in college counseling in the Atlanta area. That's awesome, Sarah. Okay. Okay, we did get a question. We won't be sending out the presentation slides for the presenters. We will send out the recording. So the presentation slides themselves won't be available, but the recording of the entire event will be available. But great question. All right, we'll get started in about 5 minutes. So, for those of you guys who are just now joining us, we are just taking a quick little break until our first session begins right at 1:05. We will have little breaks like this where we will step away. So, feel free to take a second if needed, refill your water, grab something to eat. Feel free to join us. We're going to be utilizing the chat function today and the Q&A. So, feel free to drop in chats to communicate with everyone. The Q&A will either come directly to us as panelists, or you can make it to where it goes to everyone, but most of them go directly to panelists. But we'll be utilizing all of those for it. All right. We do have our first presenter here. Jay, would you like to go ahead and kind of get started with some introductions? I'd love to just introduce you if you don't mind. Kind of go from there. Perfect. All right. So for everyone who's hung out with us while we kind of got started, we're really excited for this first presentation. So this is one of our very own SACAC, NACAC peeps here who has gone through and actually co-written an amazing, amazing resource. So after earning his master's in college counseling, Jay began his career in financial aid at a liberal arts college in Southern California before spending a decade guiding students in Colorado high schools. As department chair of counseling at George Washington High School, he led diverse college counseling initiatives and was nominated for Colorado School Counselor of the Year for his commitment to student access. Jay later transitioned to Valor Christian High School and is now at the Westminster Schools in Atlanta, Georgia, where he provides personalized college guidance tailored to students' diverse aspirations. In addition to his work in schools, he also leads Future to Find College Consulting, his private practice dedicated to helping students navigate the admissions process. An active leader in the Atlanta college counseling community, he is also active in both the national and regional branches of our association, so NACAC, and particularly the Southern affiliate here in SACAC, and the Association of College Counselors and Independent Schools. He frequently presents on topics related to college admissions and financial aid, and he also serves on advisory boards for college admissions offices and coordinates the largest college fair in Georgia. I can't think of anyone better to create a resource like this. So we have Jay here, and we also have Anthea Economy from Westminster Schools. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to pass it off to y'all to share your screen.
Thank you. I want to say thanks so much for your time and attention. It seems like there's a good group of you out there, and really excited to be able to share a little about it. I am joined by Anthea Economy, who is in my office as well. Not like in my office, but works in the college counseling office with me at Westminster. And she's going to come back on a little bit later and open it up if there's Q&A or if there's anything like that. Thanks, Melinda. Appreciate that. So I will probably not be as attentive on the chat, and so maybe she will be able to catch some of those things if there's questions that come in. But I want to make this also as interactive as possible because these days, I mean, who even reads books, right? So I figured that we could try and make this a fun process for diving in, and my way that I like to do that is through using Mentimeter, if you all are familiar with that. So if you are if you're joining, what you're going to do is you're going to go to menti.com. And my question was going, whoa, I think I'm doing this wrong. Let's see here. I was going to open up by asking the question around who you all are. Where do you all work? I would love to hear who is in the audience. So you can scan the QR code that's right there. Or you can go to menti.com and put in those 8 digits, and we can hear how we're being represented in the group today. Maybe I should. And keep the. I'm going to go through the agenda in just a second, and we'll have a few different ways that I'd love to engage with you all and make this just, I think it's interesting to do a webinar, but also I really love engagement and trying to figure out ways to chat with you all about where you're at in this process, how you think about the college list process and what it means to you and the students that you serve. So it seems like as it is right now, um, I'm seeing like 39 people in there. I think it's probably a pretty good start. Mostly over 50% coming from public schools or CBOs. So a few independent schools, and a few independent educational consultants. So I love seeing the representation of the group of you today. So, all right, I'm going to keep rolling. I want to go backwards in my rolling. So, what I have planned for today is thinking about where we search and how we go through that process, and considering the book, um, and what the book is, how it can be used for you all in this process. I would love to hear from you in the process of how you're thinking about list building and how you serve your students. I have a fun quiz. It's meant to be a fun one. Open it up for some Q&A that Anthony will help guide us through, and then sharing some resources that have been helpful to me. And Tim Fields, we presented last year at SACAC, and so I just figured, you know what, why not share it back out if it's helpful you in the process. So that's what I have for the time today. I am all over the place on my scanning. This is bad. All right, let's see here. Hopefully the same number. All right, my question um, is I'm going backwards. I am so all over the place. Okay, where do you send students to look when you tell them to research colleges? That was my opening question that I'd love for you all to consider is, yeah, when you say, like, you meet with students and you're like, well, you need to research colleges, right? What does that mean to like, what does that translate to being, and what do you think is the most helpful resource, or what is the thing that like gets them wrapping their head around, oh, I now have researched colleges and know this is where I want to spend 4 years. So it seems like SCORE is off to a good lead on the process on that. College websites, good ones, big future. I don't think I limited how many you can put in. I'm sure there's more than one. And actually, I like the diversity of responses that are in there. Google search, like that's kind of a fun one, just to list in there as well. Um, is obviously, yes, just Google the name of a college. But another one in there um, is you also give them, um, you said, what was it? ChatGPT, I'm seeing US News and World Report, um, Niche Fisk, U-Science. You've got some good ones. And I know someone said that they give a list, but I'm like, when you give a list, like what do you tell them to do with it? Even if you're like, hey, I got 5 colleges for you, go research them, right? Like we have to do something with it, and that does make sense. Big Future, SCORE, college websites. Um, so I appreciate, even just the input that you have. YouTube pages, I think, has been just a great resource that more and more of my students are using along with social media. So, all right. So now my second question is a little bit more nuanced. Is where do you look when you are researching colleges? When you, as an expert in the field, and the work that you all are doing for college access and helping students, where do you go when you start your researching? Looks like college websites are the number one, which I think we should probably reach out to the marketing team at every college and just say, hey, websites matter even more than you thought they did. College readiness software, we think of SCORE, Naviance, My Learning, all those things there. It's also obviously if your school offers it, would be one of the factors involved in it. College search engines, big future, college data. There's a couple others out there. AI software. And and it's interesting right now, like narrative form descriptions, right? Like Fisk Guide is a thing. You can read a whole thing about a college and how they evaluate it. It's been around for a long time. It's been a good resource, but again, that's not our number one thing that people are using. And I think to me, what I have been trying to wrap my head around is like, what is the right way of doing a college search and researching colleges? So it's something that that is helpful. I gave a presentation about 2 or 3 years ago, And this is the results that we had. And I just anticipated that there would be some some differences, right? That there would be something different than it was even 3 years ago, right? For instance, if you see AI software was at the bottom of the list, and how much our psyche has changed around how we utilize resources, obviously, in the time of AI is changing. But college websites, it continues to be there. But FIS Guide has changed a lot, and books, obviously. But I think it's just interesting to pay attention to. Like we are being inundated with a lot of information and trying to make sure that we use the right resources. All right. That is not the question I wanted to ask yet. So I am doing something wrong. Um, I am going to figure this out and it's going to be great. Sorry. Um, all right. That's how you enter in. Okay. So I wanted to ask the question, is when you look at the college search process and what criteria would you say these are things that you should look for yourself that are important in your search? Like, I want you to take for a second and just maybe drop into the box a comment of like maybe your top two. Like just look at the ones that are there. If your college search criteria, what things do you think sh students should be valuing in this process, um, and how you're considering it? Does that make sense? As in, of all these things that are here, take a quick second and look and maybe drop a couple comments in here so I can see what things matter to you. Or do you think students should matter to them? Am I doing this right? Yeah. All right. I see preparation for careers, grad rates, preparation for careers, happiness of students, retention rates, actual and predicted graduation rates. All right. Happiness of students. And so, um, financial resources, majors available. I think there's some good different there's some variety there. I do think that the career thing is one that people keep asking, or keep talking about. Like that is a big one. Um, and it seems like happiness of students might be the second most popular, and then people do care that they can graduate. So now, why do I list this is if you could see that I was backtracking on my slides, but is when you look at what my students this past year said were the most important of all of our juniors, we asked them these exact same questions as well. What did they consider the most important? And the top three, and last year's same top three were the happiness of students, the preparation for their careers, and the quality of the teaching, right? We care about the future. We care about the present moment. Like, can I enjoy my social life? Can I enjoy how the process goes? And is the teaching actually something that's worthwhile, right? Those were what the three ones that I've seen from my students the last few years that we've asked that question. And why I think that's important is when you look at how U.S. News and World Report did their formula rankings in the grand, I'm 1 year out, you notice that like what they're judging it on is what's available data, right? Looks like. And so I just want to highlight that faculty salaries does make up 6%, but we don't have a great way of judging happiness of students in preparation for careers or even the quality of teaching, right? We can't just like give a number towards what that is. And so that's why I think it's worth like slowing down and paying attention is that a lot of times when it comes to rankings, it's one person deciding this is what percentage we want to be able to give towards each. And so there's a natural reluctance that those that are in the field is how helpful is rankings to students in the process. And a couple resources that I wanted to give to you all is, I've enjoyed Challenge Success. I think they've done a really great job. That they're partnered with a graduate school of education at Stanford, and they have talked about like how helpful is rankings. And the overall impression is that it's available data. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the best. A lot of times, also that's input data, right? That who is the incoming students, not necessarily who is the graduating students from that university. And so it is a lot of times it sells the process a little short on understanding what an experience could be like for an individual, right? Taking another resource that I like is Georgetown Center for Education in the Workforce, and I just like this 10 rules of moving from youth dependency to adult economic independence. It's a mouthful, but the couple of things that they recommend is consider the major that you're going to study and how that might factor into your education. And don't worry too much about brand name, but can add some value. But then also seek out a curriculum that gives you a broad-based level of learning. And I think we're seeing that even right now with the amount of influx of computer science used to be highly desirable. A lot of people jumping out of that. People are still trying to figure out this existential moment of how AI will impact. But again, these rules kind of guide a little bit of it. And I kind of want to use them as a test for um, how we talk about like what a student search could be. Because if we use that instead of just college rankings, then we might have even um, a different output, a different way of engaging, a different way of researching. And um, so, all right, I do want to ask. Um, okay. So asking the question is, what do you notice your students looking for in a college nowadays? Just curious, like what things are you seeing that students are that's coming up for them in their searches and what the values are? Like, even if you think about that US News and World Report, what they're judging based on, um, what are big factors for the families that you're serving? Affordability, yeah, that's a great diversity major. Oh my gosh, yeah. Apparently, people have discovered there's this football conference called the SEC, right? Um, that doesn't come up at all for anyone all over the country. I even used to work in Colorado, and the biggest um, feeder conference, even in Colorado, at my previous school was into the SEC, more than CU Boulder and Colorado State. So I just think it's crazy what's going on. There's so much that's going on around that conversation. But I'm seeing also major school spirit is such a big one, right? Like, wow, we are not the only one talking about football. Good to know that it's just not just my school. And affordability and major, I think those are really great. Distance from home, proximity. That's good. Um, okay. Next question. What shifts have you seen around students choosing a major? Have you seen like are there more, I don't know, are there more people going into specific majors that are there more people going into undecided? Are you finding that there's um I think for a number of years, our school, like I saw an influx on computer science, right? There are a lot more people that were going that direction. Um, Going in undecided, business popular, uncertainty. Man, this is so good, y'all. I appreciate it. Concern if the career will be taken over by AI. Isn't that the moment? My brother has a senior, and he is trying to figure out what the value proposition of college is and which ones and what major and where we go with it. And so I think this is really good. Social media is influencing their major ideas. Wow, that's really intriguing. Business, engineering, healthcare, the kind of some of the usual suspects of where people are looking, nursing and finance. Cool. Um, all right, then I wanted to I know I'm like bumping in and out, but I'm gonna figure out I'm doing this. All right, so I wanted to share a little bit about the book for you and how it kind of works for me. But as we think about it, here's some of the sources that I think about when we were talking about majors you all shared. And when I think about majors, there's a couple places that I've gone to. I think Big Future was mentioned already. I think it's been helpful for sorting by that. The College Navigator has been good, and College Scorecard is really great for being able to see even how much people make when they come finish certain programs. I think it's robust if it's updated. And I know that's actually a fairly political thing to say because iPads is housed by the Department of Education. Academics, again, common data set, iPads, College Vine are places I've gone. And then financial, I've liked college data. I know it's updated by a bank. And there's a few other places I've gone. College Results is a unique one. They're through Ed Trust, and they do care a lot about like access and trying to just thinking from an equitable lens on ways of closing achievement gaps and things like that. So. But then if you notice, and there I am saying I think the book the College Finder has been a resource for all of these, and all of them have their own kind of merits of how we've gone about it. And so I wanted to stop and share a little bit more about um, just the book and how we've gone about collecting it. By the way, that's a fake picture. This was done before we even had the book out, and we didn't know the book was going to be this thick. So it looks like that's a really thin book, but that's a fake image. Um, so when we think about the four main sources, there have been how we've gone about doing it is so we would research colleges or things about a college from multiple different sources all over, trying to find out great biology programs. And you might see that list as College Finder research if you had the book. And so that does make up a good chunk of the book is just scouring wherever we can find resources on schools and continuing like just to build out and between Steve and a team of people as well and myself of just finding great lists that would be helpful towards students in the process. Other one, I did a ton with Worlds of iPads, Common Data Set, looking into information that a lot of times people just didn't know about. Looking at graduation rate, looking at retention, looking at what that led to in terms of other outcomes, and even pulling out some hidden gems of schools that have great retention rates, but don't necessarily are extremely selective, right? And so if that's a factor for you, then great, there's some things in there for you. But the book, The College Finder, is a book of lists, just to be clear. So in this book, it is just research on what's a good school for every different types of thing. And so what I'm sharing is when it comes to the sources, this is a book that is meant to be a resource where you're looking up on a myriad of different topics. And so just to share, like, these are the ways that we've gone about collecting these main sources. So it originated once upon a time. Steve, who did the first edition of this book in 1993, is he had been the dean of admissions and financial aid, and he had been the dean and had then started becoming an independent educational consultant. And he would visit these colleges and realize, oh my gosh, all these things I'm learning about colleges, they all start to run together. And so it was his effort to try and make sense of all, what's a good school for this? What's a good school for that? And he started collecting it all and gathered some of the resources from among his other peers that were in the industry and then made the first book. And since then, it's been four iterations. And this would be the fifth one. And it's about 400 pages longer than the fourth edition. So there's a lot that happened when I was able to join him in the process of making the book. And why, part of that was we did it even a lot wider in terms of our search and pulling data from different places. We always reach out to experts that are in the field on a specific population. If you look at LGBTQ students, we have certain specialists and IECs that are in that industry, or Jewish students, learning disability. There's so many different ways that we can look at it. And so it was really nice to have just a network of people that were ready and open to contributing. And then the last one is surveys to experts in the field. And you say, who are experts in the field? And I would say you all are, right? What you had today was we have independent educational consultants, those at independent schools and those at public schools that are part of SACAC. We have sent out surveys to so many different ACACs and independent schools, IECA, HECA, all of that in the process to help. So even if you look at who was part of our surveys that we sent out, we had about 1,500 surveys that were completed, which is a lot because each survey that was sent was about 40 questions on it. So it is not a small undertaking. It actually takes quite a bit of time because we actually want thoughtful responses as well as when we dive into it. By and large, you're going to find most people who had been in the field for over 12 years that were filling out the surveys, and those that were 5 to 12 years. So it is a really good, reliable source, and why I think it distinguishes itself from some of the other sources that are out there is that this is information coming from people that are doing this work day in and day out, right? And that's what I appreciate about it is not just, it's not my book, it's not just Steve's book, it is actually a collection of all the wisdom that's out there of us that are doing this work to kind of collect it and put it out for you all. And so I think that's one of the things that I appreciate about it, especially in the time of AI, where you're like, can I trust this? Is this reliable or not? Um, what I've appreciated is the expert choice lists are coming from people, and they're coming from people that are in the field as well. So, um, so I wanted to let's see here. Nope, I wanted to ask that question again. Is what is your biggest challenge in helping students prepare for college? Just curious how you all are thinking about it. Um, and I know this is a really broad question, as you all are thinking through many different things. Getting them to read their emails. Oh man. Yeah. Funding, getting them started. Oh man. Reputation of schools. Looking beyond just a name, thinking about finances, helicopter parents reading an email. Um, yeah, t-shirt culture. I think of bumper sticker culture because I think a lot of times it starts with the parents. The parents' goals, being able to meet their needs, resources about career ideas. Man, this is really great. And I think, one of those things when I think about time management is when we do this work, we're always those that are in schools are aware of like the developmental changes that happen, right? Like we get a ninth grader and we're not going to ask them right away, like, where do you want to go to college? Because we know they're still changing, they're still kind of cooking. And there's this window that happens like sometime junior year when they realize, oh my gosh, there's life after high school. And they start to think about how do I wrap my head around this the appropriate way in the college list process? And I guess to me is like the thing that I would say where there's a helpful resource in it is the book is meant to be a starting point. Is that if you build some colleges that you're looking for based on a set of different criteria, right? So if you find a student that's really into Comic-Con, and that's going to be a place where they find thriving, right? And it's not just based on rankings, but there's a lot of different ways that we can look at that. And or if you're looking for a student that is going for a rugby program or going for biology, and there's so many different ways that we can look at it. And that was the whole idea is that we're collecting a lot of different information in the process to make sense of um, all the overwhelming elements that you all do. I think in a lot of ways, counselors play this role of being like parents to all of the students. And so you all carry a lot and want to be able to provide resources to you all in the process. And so to that end. All right. Now, I've talked a bit. I want to do a fun quiz as a way of sharing a little bit about what this book can entail. And most of mine are really meant to be kind of just not ones that you should expect to know all the answers to, but it should be just fun. So if you haven't joined yet, but join the Mentee, and we're going to take a second, and I'm going to ask you, I think, 6 questions. And if you have your name in there, I should be able to see who your winner is at the end of this time. So um, coming from wherever you are. All right, so we'll dive in so that you can see that, and then we'll do a little bit Q&A right after that. Okay.
And they win a free book, right, Jay?
Sure. Let's see how that goes. All right. Well, I mean, the odds are pretty low or pretty good if you only have 22 people in this game. So we'll see. Um, yes. How about this? I'll bring the book to SACAC if you come to SACAC. And if you don't come to SACAC, then, reach out here and I would be happy to get you a book. That'd be fun. All right. We ready to start? My 31 quizzers. 3, 2, 1. All right. All right. What is a college for the flip-flop wearer, according to the experts on this survey? Who would have been your number one school? Or not the number one, actually. Who is one of the schools that came up on the list. I'm gonna trick you all, and this is funny. Oh, you guys did great. Coastal Carolina for the win. Way to go. Now, the hard part is I always point out, Pepperdine, they're on the other side of the 101. So, like, you really have so much hills on that campus that you really need to be walking in shoes. So, that's my opinion. But Coastal Carolina was one of the top schools that came up on the expert's choice questionnaire of who is a good school for flip-flop wearers. All right, next question. All right, we're still in the game. Ready? All right, let's go. What SACAC college has a great books curriculum? Here we go. Georgia College, Georgia College at Mercer, Georgia Tech, and Wofford. The votes are coming in. I'm glad I only made 20 seconds on this. Final answers. You guys are knowing your stuff. I'm impressed. Good job. Yes, Mercer. We tried to include like a full list of schools that have a great books curriculum. And I'm impressed by you all with your knowledge. That's great. Apparently, Georgia Tech did not get a lot of votes on that, but all right, let's see here. We're gonna keep rolling. Next question. Oh yeah, answer quickly to get the most points. What Sackeye College has the highest success rate for Fulbright scholars in the past 4 years? That means out of those students that have applied for a Fulbright, they've been successful in actually getting one. And they've, for the last 4 years, which of these schools has the best, admission into a Fulbright? That is a great question. Guess. Is it I'm just gonna stop and slow down for this because I know I got all of you on this, except for you three who are like beating the game. This is crazy. North Georgia is, I think, number two, highest percentage of students that go in to get Fulbrights out of any master's granting school in the country. They have a higher percentage of students getting it than all these other schools that I mentioned, and Vanderbilt does do pretty well. But I think in my notes, I think it was like, what is it? It's 30 some percent of students that were able to get a Fulbright, which is actually a really high success rate. And I'm not talking like one or two. I did it that you had to be at a school that had at least 40 kids in that have applied for it. So it's not like nobody that's a part of it. So, Jackie, Shamila. All right, we got some leaders here. It's getting interesting. See, Brian. All right. Jade is very fast, so apparently that's an award too. All right, we're gonna keep going. We got 3 more questions, and then we're going to see my get a prize, I guess. All right, what is a college for the Shakespeare lovers? Here we go. Clemson, High Point, Vanderbilt, Sewanee. I'm guessing Jade's already guessed since, yeah. All right, votes are in. Survey says yes, you guys are killing this game and do not believe in Clemson for Shakespeare. Okay. But yeah, Sewanee does, they even partner with a whole company, and in the summer they have a minor for Shakespeare studies. It is, I love hearing, seeing the collective knowledge here. That's cool. And that was one that made the list for that question as well. So I'm introing survey or lists that are in the book if you haven't guessed. All right. Next one. Scream 2, Fried Green Tomatoes, Driving Miss Daisy, and The Blind Side were filmed on what campus? Keeping it interesting and local here. Yes. All right. Agnes Scott for the win. Good work on you all knowing your 90s movies. But Birmingham Southern, RIP. But yeah, that's another fun list is we were just gathering from people in the field and our own research on sites for films. All right. Last question. Here it is for the win. I'm trying to remember what the question is. Colleges for music production. Okay, what would you say? What's a good college for music production? You might notice this question is a little bit different than some of the other ones. And this is from the list that we asked of Experts Choice list. That means it was surveyed, sent all over the country. What are the schools? If you notice, I kept all SACAC schools that were considered great for music production. Good news, everyone. You're all right. All four of those schools were on it. And so it was a trick question. All four of them are part of it. So, anyway, all that to say, who's my final winner? I don't have a last name. And if it's Magical Rhino, I'm going to have a hard time knowing who you are. Jackie. Is that Jackie Atchison? I don't. All right. Well, you'll have to put a comment in the chat because congrats on the win. That's really fun. Well, hopefully that was a fun way of introducing the book a little bit to you. Oh, it is. All right. All right, Jackie. If you don't have a book, then I would love to give you one. And we'll have to just get it to you at SACAC or something like that. Don't worry. We can get you another one either way. Um, yeah, Ebony for the win on the speed as well. Yeah, shout out there. So all right, so I just want to say that hopefully this is a fun way of kind of introing it to you all. And but I'm gonna stop out and we're gonna have a couple questions that might come up and has a quick engagement. And if there's any questions that you all had in the process, maybe this would be a good way of chatting through it. And then I'll share my resources at the end as well and come back to that way if that helps for you all. So, I asked Anthea to join, and if you have questions that come up, I'm going to try not to read chat because it gets me really distracted.
Well, I was going to say a couple of things. Number one, thank you and Steve for doing all the research because I use your book all the time. And I was just thinking, I was thinking as you were presenting that Sunday I was prepping a couple of junior conferences and they were nuanced. I typically know schools that meet full need, right? But it was for a lower tiered, lower achieving student and a quick perusal, and I had a list pretty, nicely and
Yeah.
succinctly, and thanks to your hard work.
Mhm.
Likewise, last year I had I have an interesting senior that's really into anime, and I'm not, full disclosure, right? And I was like, what is that? So
Right.
a quick look in that, and then I had the list, and it has really materialized from there. Female rugby player. So really nuanced lists that are at your fingertips. So appreciate all that hard work. And also know fully that I will be paying for that book for Jackie as well, since I
Okay.
offered that. But I do have a couple of questions here for you. As I was thinking about while you were presenting and wanted to offer one off the bat here, you often emphasize student-driven college searches. What does that really, like a student-led process look like at home?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's always that dance that we have of like again the procrastinating student or the one that doesn't respond to emails as you all are sharing is there is to me that there's different stages of the development like we were talking about is to me like that ninth and 10th grade the more that we can encourage kids to go visit a campus. I talked about the difference between Morehouse, SCAD, Georgia Tech, Georgia State. Spelman, right? Like all these are local schools for us in Atlanta and even I could say Georgia, but yet like are they ranked against each other, right? Like there's a sense that like the more we can see like the nuance of what it works for a kid and maybe the anime community know what that looks like, the more they can start to see themselves in it. And I think that's a really good step for underclassmen, but also even juniors that are kind of new to it. But for me, I would like it if well, what I'm seeing is that kids are applying to more colleges now, and I think that's really well known. And the Common App allows for up to 20. I encourage students to look wider, and so that they can, as a junior, I always like to see like 15 to 20 colleges that a kid has wrapped their head around. And I don't think this is out of the question because there are so many options out there. And to me, the benefit of that is it's the right timing of it, right? And there is often times where students will ask. They will not get into the school that they want to in the fall, and then they're starting their college search process. And so to me, like starting broadly and growing it, and it's a good one to do a little bit earlier than later. And then to me, it's like really just starting to define it and starting to figure out what your non-negotiables are. And I think the more that you as counselors help them out in that process as they start to realize through all those visits what's going on. So, hi, Jillian. And then from there it's shaping. And I don't think, every kid should be applying to 20 schools. It's about paring it down and finding the right amount for each school. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you also talk a lot about fit over brand name, which I think we all do as college counselors. What does fit really mean, and how can families identify it beyond marketing materials or rankings?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I was trying to allude towards that a little bit before, but um and I didn't really share as much about how I came into the College Finder. Like for me, I was living in Denver, and I remember when I was still working in a public school, is I had a seasoned college consultant who gave me the third edition, and she said, if you really want to get to know colleges, you should get to know this book. And so I was essentially first a fanboy in the process of what College Finder is because I started to treat it like a textbook. I mean, I had my wife quiz me at night on random biology program. I just really enjoyed the process. And I guess that's the thing to me is like the College Finder, you could say it is the antithesis of college rankings, or you could say it's like the pinnacle of it because like it's the best school based on this one factor, right? And so it was not just one thing that we cut up a school and said this is what you should value. Instead, it was meant to be like very nuanced. What's the top school for an English major, and what's the top school for um, patriotic student or very active student bodies, bigger colleges that feel small. And then when you start to think that rankings are just someone else's priorities that are quantified, then you start to think like, what ways can we pull fit back? And so I think that's what I've loved about the book is that it's allowed it to be personalized. It's still kind of a choose your own adventure type of book.
Great. Thank you. And one last one here. Research shows high achieving teens are more anxious than ever. A lot of us see that obviously day in and day out. How can the college search be reframed as a season of kind of curiosity versus competition for
Yeah.
you?
Well, I think us as counselors, we have this duty to try and relay what college is. Um, and I think there's different ways that we could talk about that. For me, I really enjoyed the 4 years of college. I don't think the admissions process is what got me excited. And I think that's the same true for high achieving schools and high achieving students is there's that continual type of like lingering is like when I hear the word college, I try and check in with my students like, how anxious are you about this process? And I think the average response I get from a kid is like, I'm a 7 out of 10, right? Anxious about just college. And I'm like, wow, that's something. Like that's not nothing. And so I would rather say if we can shape the conversation around like the 4 year experience and not admissions, then college actually means something different. And I had a student who came to me a while ago, or 3 years ago, and she's like, I don't let my parents say the C word at home. Like it's just we don't do it. And she was incredibly anxious. And for her, it was like this reflection of her, like this is I'm gonna be judged by. And so it allowed hi y'all. It allowed for just like her to not really get past it. And so the more we started to dream about like what could the college be, and she was just this brilliant mind about biology, but at the same time like loved anthropology, and she just was had so many different things that she didn't think about, but she wasn't interested in being part of like a rat race. And so the more that we got her to think about like a place where she could thrive, the more she got to see like her people. And for her, that was finding a place at Carleton where she landed and she found her people and she's been really, really happy. And so that's been a really fun part about this process is seeing her people's journey in the process of that they can frame this a little bit more around the 4-year experience. And that's what I think, the book is trying to do in the process. So, yeah.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Mhm. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I'm going to pull up my last slide. I'm still learning how to do a Menti with a Google Doc, but if you all have want to check out the book, you can check out, there's on our website, thecollegefinder.net, it has like 3 different places to buy. I can't tell you which one is the cheapest right now because Amazon changes and Barnes& and Noble and Walmart. You can sign up to join, and I am on social media if you want to be a part of it. As I shared that I would share some resources that have been helpful, um, and you can check those out by following the QR code. Some places that have been helpful in doing that college search process. And then if you have email questions that you might do, ways I can support you, give you more resources along the way, please send me an email and I'd be happy to see how I can help. So I want to say thanks again to SACAC for giving me the time to be able to talk about it. And hopefully this is a fun way of breaking up. And thanks again also for all of you. I know it's a busy day and I'm sure students are still in your office. And for you to even be available to listen and to hear us out. And hopefully it was a fun time in the process.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you, Anthea. Jay, I know that you said you don't like to look through the chat because it kind of distracts you, but if you weren't looking through it, people really, really enjoyed that. I even wrote down Menti because that was just a fun way to take a quiz. So I think you did a great job, and I just bought the book on Amazon myself. So
All
great
right.
job to both you guys. Thank you all so much for spending time with us.
Of course. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I think
All
I got
right.
my screen share. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Jay. Bye. All right, for everyone who's still with us, we are going to take a quick break. So we will join right back at 1:55 for our next session hosted by Garn. In the meantime, we are going to do a couple advertisements just for some of the great things coming up with SACAC. So give me 1 second to share the screen. All right, I'm going to pass it off to Amy to share a bit more about our free access membership. Amy, I think you're muted. You're good.
Sorry, guys. First commercial break that we promised all of you. While you are doing a quick check of your emails, making sure there are no emergencies or anything that need your attention, we wanted to highlight a couple of things like Kaylee said. The first one we wanted to talk about was the free access membership. So for all of the public high school people that are on here, people from CBOs, hopefully you guys are already taking part of this great resource that is available to you through SACAG, and that is a free access membership, meaning that all of the amazing resources that SACAG provides are available to you for free. SACAG really is looking to continue to build the enrollment of public school and CVO membership within SACAC. There's such a great connection when we're all doing the great work with our private school partners and college admissions partners supporting students. And so they have seen the need to build this and have provided this resource for us. If you're not already a member, you can certainly scan right there or go on to the website and look for free access membership to access this complimentary membership from SACAC. If you are already a member, then I really encourage each of you to think about somebody that is maybe sitting right next to you in your office that does not belong. Talk to them about the great opportunities that SACAC provides, whether it's through professional development like this, if it's the Wednesday emails we get that have tons of great information, book studies, the amazing conference you're going to hear about later. There's such great stuff available, and encourage them to join because it's free and a great way to connect with a lot of people. And so if you guys have any questions, certainly reach out. But we want to make sure you knew about this.
Amy? All right. Our next one is extending the dream. So this grant, it's meant to enable members of SACAC to be able to continue doing the great things that you're doing in your own community. So it's awarded annually and it's meant to serve college-bound students. The grant typically ranges from $500 to $3,700. They do provide a couple examples of things that this can go towards, but grant winners have always talked about some of the other amazing things they've been able to do as well. And you're in luck because the application just opened on February 4th. February 18th, so in 8 days, there will be a webinar that will be an overview of extending the Dream Grant. And then March 4th is when the application is due, making sure you note that time. I know we're in the Eastern time zone, but I know that always tricks people up. So making sure that you note that time for it. Interviews will happen March 24th through 26th, and then you'll be notified March 27th through the 28th. And again, it is a reimbursement grant. So I think that's something just to note. Very important that it is a reimbursement grant. If you're going to apply for this, you can use the QR code as well. But that SACAC website, so sacac.org, is it going to have links to all of the different things that we talk about today as well. And then knowing that the chair for that committee is Noah Pittman with the University of Arkansas.
Right, and I just wanted to touch base about the Counselor Participation Fund. So this fund provides financial assistance to secondary counselors and college representatives who might have limited resources and want to attend some of the SACAC professional development opportunities that are available. So it's an application-based process, and there are definitely more applicants than there is funding available. But funding is available for the SACAC annual conference, summer seminar, the sweet tea tour, and the dry run. So it does say here preferences will be given to counselors working in public high schools and CBOs, as well as those who serve traditionally underrepresented student populations. So the application for people who are looking to get CPF funds for the conference is in the fall, and that has already passed. But it just opened recently for people who are looking to apply for funds for the summer seminar, the sweet tea tour, and the dry run. And that application is due March 17th. So that is open now. You can apply online, and you can find out a lot more information on the SACAC website. So this is a great resource if funds are limited, but you are very interested in participating. Certainly go ahead and try to take part in this.
Perfect. We have about 2 minutes before our next session starts. So, final call for any of your needs you might need in the meantime. Always, again, feel free to step out and come back in. We will be sending out the recording from this. We will not share the slides. We won't send those in a follow-up email, but we will send out the recording. So, you'll have access to that. So, we'll start our next session right at 1:55. Take another minute to get started, just doing a presenter check. I think I see all of you guys. Hi, guys. I saw Heidi, but let's see. Nope. Hi, Heidi. You were on my other screen.
Hi.
Hello. All right. Thank you guys for being here today. Very excited.
Yes, I have to tell you guys, Garn reps, I previewed your slide deck last night and was telling the group earlier, it looks amazing. I was like, you guys are going to be so excited, all the stuff they're talking about. So we're excited to have you guys.
Yeah.
Yay. And thank you so much, Shane and Thea. We kind of jumped on at the end of your presentation. So thank you for being so polite with us and welcoming us. But we're excited to be here and we're excited to present for you all. Would you like me to go ahead and take over my screen share at this time?
Sure. I will stop screen sharing and we'll go ahead and introduce you guys if you want to get yours set up. So that sounds great.
Okay.
All right. And let me know if you run into any issues with that. Oh,
Does this
I see
work for
it.
you?
Yep, you should be good. I'll go ahead and welcome everyone back and then pass it off to you, okay?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kayla.
Okay.
Or Kaylee. Oh my gosh. Sorry.
You're fine. You're so
Kaylee,
fine.
thank you.
Yes. Welcome back, everyone. We're glad that you are still with us, and appreciate you. I know this is when the, that lag from lunch starts to set in. So hopefully you grabbed your coffee, and you're ready to lock in because we're really excited for this presentation as well. I'm a little biased because I was a part of GARN for a number of years. So I love this organization, love these people and what they're able to provide. So our next session is hosted by representatives from the Greater Atlanta Regional Network, also known as GARN. This is a community of professionals, professional college and university representatives from 2 or 4 year academic institutions who serve youth and their families in the Atlanta area. GARN provides networking opportunities for those regionally located in the Atlanta area or work from home or at a university sponsored regional center. But it's committed to helping provide collaborative spaces for high school and college counselors to provide educational access to students. So I'm going to pass it off to Jillian, who will get us started. And again, we're just so thankful for you guys.
Awesome. Well, we are thankful to be here. Kaylee talked about the lunch lull, and I'm definitely feeling that this afternoon. But hopefully, this session is enjoyable. We've made it a little interactive, and hopefully, you have some key takeaways. So, I know that as school counselors, you sit in on a lot of these sessions. You probably have heard several of these sessions at SACAC or at other drive-ins. And so we're trying to make this one a little more unique. We're going to try to pull back the curtain a little bit more on things that admissions counselors wish they could say out loud, but usually can't. And the conversations that we wish we could always have, but it sometimes get a little too in the weeds. So to get started, we're going to introduce ourselves. My name is Jillian Bullock. I am an Associate Director of Admissions at Georgia College and State University. I've been in higher education now for 10 years this December, so that's exciting. And I'm also the chair of the Greater Atlanta Regional Network. And I'm going to pass it off to Pete.
Thanks, Jillian. My name is Pete Steins. I'm a regional recruiter based out of the Atlanta area for the University of Alabama at Birmingham. I've been in admissions. This is my 11th year. Thus far, UAB is my fifth school. So very happy to be here. I oversee Eastern Georgia and I split Atlanta pretty down the middle with my supervisor who's also based here in Atlanta. But yeah, thanks so much. And I'll hand off to Heidi.
Hi, everybody. My name is Heidi Behringer. I am a regional counselor with High Point University here in Atlanta. I've been in higher ed for almost 4 years. My anniversary is February 28th. But some of you guys may recognize me. I formerly worked for Oglethorpe University and am now with High Point, and I'm so glad to be with you guys today.
Awesome. So we're going to get started with a little interactive exercise. And I'm not sure if you have access to thumbs up posts in the chat, but I did see some reactions come through. So you can comment in the chat or thumbs up if you're able to. But to get us started, how many of our guests here think admissions is getting more predictable? So we think admissions is getting more predictable. I dropped that in the chat. Go one thumbs up. Hi, Laura. Mark's face, I feel like, says so much. I saw a thumbs up come through. Okay. I saw a down. All right. This next one, if you recently felt surprised by an admissions outcome. So maybe you had a student who you thought for sure was a shoo-in at a university. They applied and then you were surprised when they got denied, or maybe the other way around. Lots of people who are really surprised by certain admissions decisions. Wow. I feel like on my side of the desk, I'm surprised by decisions sometimes. Okay. How about this year or in recent years has a family ever said, but you sent someone there last year? So maybe their student got denied, but you sent someone there last year. I'm going to type in chat, but you sent someone there last year. We're getting a couple of reactions, okay? Um, and then how many of you, and we won't take personal offense to this, but how many of you think admissions reps are dishonest about their review? We said no, there isn't a quota for your high school, but you're noticing the pattern. Yes, I guess. I'm seeing one thumbs down, and I don't know if that thumbs down is indicating that we are performing in a thumbs down or if you feel like we're honest. Never. Okay, well, never is good. I do think the closer relationship you have with us, the more mixed these responses might be. Holistic review is a veil for second review. Interesting. Always honest, like the government, exactly like lawyers, right? Perfect. Okay, well, this is some interesting feedback to get us started on. Hopefully, that woke you up a little bit. So, as part of this presentation, we're going to cover a bunch of different topics. And the topic that we're going to start with is one of my favorites. It's the real blame. So, why we can't really talk about it and what might be happening behind the scenes. And to get us kicked off, I'm going to pass it off to Pete.
Perfect. Thanks, Jillian. So we don't like to point the fingers. I don't think there's just one particular blame or finger to point or direction to point it, especially with everything coming into mind. But I think if there's a lot of layers, there's a lot of different things that can come into play, especially with these sometimes more challenging than not conversations. And when we're having that next steps conversation with parents, students, especially counselors as well, and getting everybody on the same page where possible, however possible. I think, and I love, especially with this slide, we kick things off with institutional priorities and a very intentional and tactful reason because it's kind of like the weather. It's kind of like the stock market, for better or worse. It's subject to change, where a lot of us are in weekly meetings where sometimes we're up in a certain population, sometimes we're down, sometimes we can figure out why that might be, and sometimes we have no idea, but it's an exciting boat either way. So a lot of times what'll come into play on our end in the admission side of things is kind of like plates spinning in the air, ball juggling, balancing act as to trying to go ahead and serve each population equally as possible, maybe go ahead and bridge a little bit more of a gap to underserved populations, which can sometimes be conflicting priorities. Most of the institutions, if not all the institutions in GARN, just as a sample size, are focused on diversity in lots of different ways, from geographic diversity, trying to recruit all 50 states, U.S. territories, as well as boosting international populations. Sometimes it can be diversity with socioeconomic populations and variants as well. So it really depends. And I think a lot of times it's based on climate, it's sometimes based on season, current events especially, and sometimes some of these competing priorities can go head to head with each other. So it's something to go ahead and keep in mind, especially with that in mind. Yield projection is another one. So I think it's a conversation to kind of have in an algebraic sense of mind, where we're not really getting it down to an exact science each and every year, but what we are trying to do is extend the most offers of admissions to the most competitive and impressive students. Every single student's impressive, and as much as we'd love to invite every student to be a part of our campus community, unfortunately, we want to make sure no matter what, we're not over enrolling. We're not diminishing an experience for any student down the trail. We have plenty of housing if we're a residential community or don't have impact majors for students to potentially worry about there. So it's a little bit of a balancing act, especially with that in mind. And while all the while, especially with these types of conversations happening all throughout the enrollment cycle and funnel, we're trying to go ahead and see how many offers of admission can we extend without over enrolling, without under enrolling, so that we go ahead and still keep the kind of lifeblood of the university or college going strong there. And that's tough, right? That's definitely a challenge to bear in mind all throughout while this is happening kind of on a day to day, week to week, or hour to hour, sometimes even kind of moments. Another thing factoring in is geographic balance and saturation. So I myself, I work for a university in Alabama. It's a public institution. I've worked for public institutions previously, but I'm based here in Georgia. Just as a frame of reference, that sometimes we can be focused as a based out of state recruiter for an in-state institution to go ahead and have a similar but different conversation with out of state populations versus in-state. I'm thinking of several schools. I will not name names that I've worked for, but also travel with and love absolutely working with their offices that that sometimes it can be a little more competitive, sometimes a lot more competitive to apply and hopefully gain entry to a particular institution as an in-state student rather than as an out-of-state student, which is going to be paying a little bit more with out-of-state tuition. So no perfect solves, no wrong answers, but definitely a lot to think about while we're kind of navigating this discussion and process, as well as major and academic area demands. So some majors might be a little bit more competitive, have a little bit of a higher bar. Some majors might have an additional component or review process for something like performing arts, if it might be music or theater, an audition piece for something like architecture or portfolio review. So really understanding why there's that extra step, I would say, in place, and all the while making sure that there's a lot that really goes into the decision-making process from the admissions review, the program specifics, but really circling back and making sure no matter what, the student's going to be successful and in their comfort level if they go ahead and accept that offer of admission to that institution. Thanks, Jill. So behind closed doors, really, it can sometimes inadvertently, I would say more often times than not, be a little bit of a conflicting conversation with different sources of information. I love the quote in the chat. I'd like to serve flag on that. Like, oh, totally honest, just like the government. Yeah, yeah, sure. My dad was a federal government employee. He turned out okay. He's not the best or worst example, but definitely mixed messaging, I think, is a very safe consensus across the board. So sometimes it can be a little bit muddled in terms of what the actual message is, depending on where it's coming from. And with that day to day, week to week, even sometimes month to month update with where's this information, how old is it, how new is it, and where do we go from there? When we're looking at something in terms of like the institution, the website versus the committee conversation, that can be like a best case. I would say I try to round up and stay upbeat and chipper and positive when I discuss like the committee review and discussing how we have that committee for a reason when it comes to reviewing applications. That it's a holistic review in most cases, but there's multiple perspectives looking at different things. Some folks have been in admission several years, some folks might be a little bit newer, but it always helps to have that kind of separate set of eyes and multiple sets of eyes on each application. Sometimes the website might be a little bit more data, numbers, metric focus, which is helpful. But I do think it's really important to keep in mind that a lot of those averages are based on the previous year. And so it might be some outdated information because a lot of what we're doing in terms of offers of admissions is current and present day and based on the current application cycle. And as those applications are trickling in, it might get more competitive than the year prior, might be less competitive, but always depends. And then the school's profile and how the student compares. So the profile is helpful. That's a lot of great information to go ahead and incorporate in terms of the admissions review. But I like to personally think of that as to in terms of like the profile of the school, the context of the school, how we're going to be reviewing the application, not necessarily differently for worse or even, but I would say really so we know exactly what we're looking at when it comes to that individual school setting. Things like population numbers. I think we mentioned a little bit earlier in the chat there is that, there's a little bit of a turnabout this year where some students might have not been accepted when previous years they might have been and vice versa. So it's really helpful to know when we're looking at a school, not just the institutional demographics, public or private, size of the graduating class population, Title I, anything of the sort there, but especially knowing exactly what we're looking at when it comes to really inside baseball, I would say, or inside admissionsy. It's statistics and numbers, metrics to be familiar with, things like grade scales, where an A at one school based on like a 93 to 100 might be a little bit different at a different school when it might be a 90 to 100. Classes that are offered, classes that aren't offered. So we don't hold a student at a disadvantage for not taking a class that they didn't have access to. Again, a lot of layers, a lot of data points that come into play, especially with these conversations as well. The weight and the rigor would be another one. I know a lot of my colleagues that are based in Garn here are overseeing recruitment from different states. So it's really helpful to know what type of GPA scale that institution is working with. So when you look at that transcript as a glance at first, that tip of the iceberg, you can understand and better understand how you arrived at that particular number. And then all the while, the other one, patterns can shift year to year within the same schools. I think we spoke to that. I think it's even within the same year. It can change very radically, very quickly. Sometimes feel like we're stopping and changing things on a dime, most definitely. And all the while that admissions can't always be fully transparent with students. That's a very true statement, most definitely. We want to, as much as we want to, but we can't. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that in particular. Personal experience and professional experience in the field is that a lot of times when it's a not so great admissions decision. We don't at UAB like to say like deny or reject because of the harsh tones, but it's a never a no, it's only ever a not yet or a not right now. It's a speed bump, not a stop sign, if anything. But all the while, it's very important to have that level of conversation and communicativeness with a student, with a family, with a parent, with a counselor. And we want to go ahead and tell them everything we know, but sometimes we don't always know it. Kind of conversely, it's been my experience that a lot of times students and parents, sometimes even counselors, want to get it down to one thing in particular. What was the one thing that didn't get me accepted or get them accepted or admitted? And a lot of times layers come into play where we can't get it down to one thing. Staying upbeat, positive, and chipper, I like to say that students are kind of like fingerprints. They're all unique, they're all original, they all make their own individual impression. Snowflake example gets overplayed, especially now more than ever. But really, we're not always able, if able ever, to go ahead and get it down to one particular thing.
And I want to jump in on that if that's
Yeah,
okay, Pete. So
sure.
on the admissions can't always be fully transparent with families topic, I feel like this is something that y'all experience on the school counselor side as well, where you like I feel like the first maybe 3 or 4 years in higher ed, I was like, I am gonna be as upfront as I can about everything that I can and provide as much information. And I feel like students and families sometimes latch on to the bits and pieces that they want to hear and not always the full context. And so then they're quoting you as a professional, and the quotes are not aligning with what you said. And so then they're coming forward and they're saying, "Oh, Miss Jillian said that I could appeal my application and I would get admitted." And I would come forward and say, "No, I didn't say that you could appeal your application and get admitted. I said that there is an option to appeal. We review appeals on additional academic information, maybe submit additional transcripts, additional test scores if you have them, if that's something you're interested in doing. Not every university offers appeals." But it seems like sometimes there's very selective hearing. And when you go through the process of really trying to be transparent, but some things aren't sticking with students or families, I feel like you start to cut that part out and you opt not always to share some of those details. And so that part can be difficult. I think that also sometimes we try to be transparent about difficult topics like geographic diversity and how that makes a more well-rounded class at a university. But then students say, is that discriminatory if you're admitting more students from this area and less students from this area? Let me get our family's lawyers involved. I'm going to tie in the legal team. Let me copy the president of the institution. So I think that it we have to identify when it is most effective to be transparent. And I think that those experiences kind of play into it and shift and mold how we approach transparency.
Yeah,
I
if I
see.
can just add
Yeah.
just one thing. I think kind of going along with the prompt that was asked earlier about have you ever gotten an admission decision that surprises you? I think, like Jillian was saying earlier, like, yeah, there have been decisions for students that we absolutely like adore and are like, they would be such a great fit, that we're surprised by and we are personally upset about, but we can't necessarily express that in the same way. And so I think part of this is also just remembering that we're all on the same team and we all love our students. So,
And I see this question, how much does legacy really come into play? Can you answer honestly? Um, I think one of the most difficult things in college admissions is it always depends, right? It depends on the frame of the university and how they view it. Really quick, can we all just answer whether or not legacy plays a role in our admissions process?
It doesn't at UAB.
I would say it depends because we conduct holistic review. It's something we make note of, but isn't necessarily like a make or break type of thing.
And I think that for us, it kind of checks the box in demonstrated interest. Like a student whose legacy is more likely to yield, they have more demonstrated interest. I think that it's kind of weighed as demonstrated interest for a lot of schools that look at demonstrated interest as a factor as part of their admissions review. This next question, and then we'll continue in just a bit. This says, wonder how diversity plays in without a question on race. Again, it depends based on university, but something I can add is students can't disclose their race. Like we won't see their race on their application, but we can see obstacles that come through in their essay. And I think that we all measure obstacles that students have overcome and how they're persevering through them. And you can identify obstacles that come with different racial or ethnic or cultural or religious groups. And so students that speak to that diversity and how they'll bring that diversity to a college campus and how they've overcome prejudice and obstacles from being members of that group, I think can benefit a student in the holistic review. Did y'all want to add anything on that before we move on? Okay. And yes, our job is hard like yours, but I feel like we face some of the same challenges. And like Heidi said, we are on the same team. Okay, back to Pete.
Yeah, great shares. Appreciate it, everybody. So we all did. We also want to include in conversation and talking points, kind of like how we use what we use when it comes to like a behind the scenes review for different materials that come our way, especially from the college counseling, guidance counseling, or the high school directly. In particular, the school profiles, counselor letters, mid-year grades, as well as the context of what goes into the application. School profiles we spoke to a little bit earlier. I like to tell new hires in our office that that's kind of like a decoder ring in that sense of it helps us understand exactly what we're looking at. So in the iceberg example, we might be looking at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to senior year grades, a rigorous course selection, a GPA that might be cumulative, but we really understand and do a little bit of a deeper dive, understanding how we got there, solving for that X, and really what that means in terms of the overall trajectory and cumulative performance. When we're looking at something like counselor letters, and we've got more information on that coming up, that is really helpful information that we would put in the voice of the application as we categorize kind of the qualitative materials, where it's the student speaking on their behalf with the essay and the other application questions being answered, but also having others speak on their behalf, folks that know them well, especially and hopefully their high school counselor. Realistically, it might be a different conversation from student to student from the same counselor, somebody they know a little bit better, somebody might be new to the high school, the counselor might be new to the high school as well, the student as well, also I meant to say earlier, but really it's helpful. The more specific we can be, the better and authentic. I've had some great counselor letters that have been very upfront, very honest, that say, I'm new to the school. I don't know the student as well as I should. Or I've been trying to get the student in my office for a meeting for the past 4 years, and this is the first time I've ever really had anything to say about them, not in a bad way. So it's very helpful to kind of set a baseline and know where we're coming in, knowing the student from how we know the student or how well we might not know the student. So we have a better idea as to what to go ahead and look for down the trail with reading that letter a little bit more. The mid-year grades can come into play as well. I think that's going to be another school by school case and area example in the sense of sometimes if it's a student that wasn't offered admission right away, if they might be going through an appeal process or have been offered a deferral, those can hopefully build that case back up for an offer of admission to be considered. Sometimes for scholarship consideration as well, sometimes for program specific, sometimes a contingent offer of admission, and that really might help that case. But really, it's going to depend on that school overall. I think more than anything, the consistency is going to be that every school that I've worked with and folks that I travel with, it's always a contingent offer of admission on successful academic completion. So, of course, we want the student to graduate. We need the student to graduate, but we definitely want to make sure they're not going ahead and slumping over senior year, taking any sort of academic dip, encountering any sort of academic dip, excuse me, senioritis is what I think of. I goof with students and say it's real disease according to WebMD. So try to avoid it where you can, how you can, but really want to make sure they're finishing strong and across the board when we make that offer of admission based on where they were clocking in during the application review academically, they're maintaining that level of performance. They're meeting that expectation because that's what we're basing off whether or not they're going to be successful in our community on campus. So incredibly important there, as well as context, really making sure no matter what, we are filling in every possible blank, how and where we can. And we do miss things very regularly. It might be a student didn't feel comfortable at the time sharing a particular topic or piece of information. Maybe the counselor felt it was an overstep if they did. But really, we're asking for as much information as possible, wherever possible, without that overstep, without making somebody share something they weren't completely comfortable with overall. Excellent. And then recommendation letters. So I think most institutions nowadays, especially, will usually, if they require them, ask for 2 to 3. My professional record from a friend of a friend's story is 30 letters of recommendation. That's a lot. I was a student that went back to kindergarten, every school, every class, every grade. They got to perfect it from everyone. And the common denominator in the moral of that story is it was a lot of repetitiveness. Little Jimmy, awesome kid, great. But I would say with that, a lot of times they can, not even on purpose, be very repetitive, talking about the same student, because sometimes there's only so much that you can say about a particular student. They can also be repetitive coming from the counselor without even meaning to be, where great kid, great stock, great family, a lot of buzzwords like that we get. So what we're really looking for is that authenticity, that firsthand perspective. Again, circling back, how well do you or don't you know this student? Not in a bad way, so we can establish some credibility right off the bat as we're doing a deeper dive on that and know what we might be missing or how we can use this information as part of that application review. We included some mentions here, what we stop reading, identical phrases across students, overly clean narratives, pleasure to have in class, really the vagues, the mentions that really don't go in depth that could apply to pretty much every student in a different capacity or another. So it's okay to not include those. It's not like you're saying anything bad about the student. I think that's a little bit of a kind of mental roadblock for a lot of counselors that I've spoken with. But really, the good things, the more specific things, the better in that specific example. What we're looking for is storytelling, context. We want to hear, hopefully, that the students had a positive impact in their school community, but the more specific, the better. How, where, when, why did they start a club that they were passionate about? Were they, championing a certain project, things like that? Context, really, anything and everything can come into play there, from the transcript side of things to circle back. We don't know what we're not told. So if there might have been, heaven forbid, a loss in the family, if there might have been any sort of medical emergency that accounts for any sort of dip or downward trend in terms of academics, that's helpful. And that's not something that's going to hurt the student. We're looking at that GPA without any context. That's definitely more harmful than not knowing how and where we got that context or what that was to account for. Excuse me. And then here's what the student isn't telling you. Here's what's happening at home. Again, not an overshare. I think that's a great conversation for a counselor to have with the student. Is there anything you don't feel comfortable sharing, to kind of suss that out and gauge that out? But really, the more the better when it comes to information, especially. And then how we use them. So rec letters are kind of on our end, or how we calibrate what we're looking at, how we're looking at in terms of the application overall. Again, circling back, we want to understand where the student is going to be successful in our specific community, how successful they're going to be. We're playing a long game, not just in terms of hoping the student comes to our school, but retains, graduates, has a positive overall experience. And we're looking at that kind of 4-year big picture framework for sure. And then it helps us advocate for the student when we're in a committee review or any sort of review process where other folks are looking at the application. These notes are especially helpful when we can present the student to our colleagues, especially in the admissions office.
And like Pete said, when we notice a red flag in a student or a gap in the transcript or poor grades during one trend, we usually look at these documents in order to identify what's happening there. So awesome. Now I'm going to pass it off to Heidi.
Great. So I do want to talk a little bit about the essay, just as you guys are advising students. And we have a great example from this past weekend. So we all participated in the AICS event, where we were actually going through applications with students. And one student made a comment saying, like, is the essay really that important? Like, if I mention the wrong university or whatever, like, do admissions offices actually care about that? And yes, we do actually care about that. So because we do actually read the essay, so we read the main Common App essay that students have to submit, but we also read all of the supplemental answers as well. So, and I think generally that's just a life skill, like knowing like that you need to have attention to detail when you're submitting something that is important. So just making sure students are aware that it is an important thing to pay attention to the words that they're using, not just copying and pasting and then just saying, okay, well, let me just submit this. So kind of to build upon that, so essays rarely get someone in, but they often keep students out. So I think this kind of gets into part of what we'll talk about later, which is just consistency in the application. So a student could have all A's, have a really great transcript, have really great involvement, and then you get to the essay and the grammar is all over the place. It is like the worst structured thing you've ever seen, and it's just very like stream of consciousness where it's clearly, they just typed on their computer and they just didn't go in with a plan at all. And obviously, we do holistic review, right? So we're not just saying, okay, we're only looking at the essay and saying deny or accept. But it is a piece of the whole puzzle, right? Because students are going to have to write essays in college. Like they need to know how to format things, how to draw out a plan, develop an idea, like create a thesis statement, like intro, body paragraphs, and conclusion, and be able to do that successfully. And obviously answering the prompt, like can they follow the instructions for doing that? Sometimes students choose a prompt and then they just straight up don't address it. Um, that is very important that they know how to follow instructions. So another thing we do want to just address is the use of AI. And so I usually talk to kind of all my students about this is AI is a tool that they can use to create an outline, to kind of brainstorm ideas for their essay, but they definitely should not use it as a copy and paste option to just get out of doing the work, which I know you guys are probably encouraging your students to do as well, to actually put in the effort, just because I think the essay is also, yeah, is also an opportunity for them to reflect on their own experiences. And so I think just putting in the prompt and just kind of having that spit out an answer is kind of robbing them of the opportunity for reflection and growth on their experiences in high school. And also we can tell when an essay is AI generated, like it just sounds super stiff and cold and impersonal and usually is very generic and vague. And so lots of M dashes, as you guys know. And so just making sure that that is going to be personal and not copied straight up from AI. And kind of just moving quickly through the other pieces. But yeah, so just writing an essay that your teacher would be able to recognize as your voice, your best friend, and making it specific to the university that you are applying to. I feel like one of my favorite essays that I have read was an essay about Legos. And one of my students, she wrote about Legos and about helping her siblings like build different projects. And I read that essay like 2 years ago, but I still remember it. So I think, it doesn't have to be a student's like their worst experience of their life that they need to write about to feel like they need to get the empathy or compassion of the admissions committee, but it just needs to be something personal and important to them. So, Pete, Jillian, I don't know if you guys want to jump in to talk about an essay that you really enjoyed reading.
Yeah, I'll share one really quick. Well, I'll share two. I have one that's kind of a cute, funny one, and I heard another admissions counselor share this, and so it's not actually an essay that I've read, but it was about a student who collects bath bombs, and they talked about how they're all different shapes and sizes and colors, but then there's always kind of a surprise inside, and it talks about how this student kind of relates to the bath bomb because what's inside is very different than the external appearance, and it was just a really cute, thoughtful essay. Um, Another example that I tell students sometimes when I do essay workshops is my significant other immigrated from South Asia and his family moved to the US when he was very, very young. And so we were in New York. He grew up in Brooklyn. And I asked him, I said, when you're here in New York, when you're close to your family, do you feel closer to home? Like when you're surrounded by the culture that is, your familial background. And he said to me, when I'm home or when I'm here, I feel more at home, but I feel further away from the world that I want to live in. And I was like, wow, that was beautiful. That would make a great college essay. And so I like to give that example too. Pete, did you have one?
Yeah, they just got deep. For sure. Yeah, for me, I tell students a great hook, the power of a great hook, and it doesn't have to be the best hook ever, but I think usually that first step is always the hardest step for students. So one of my favorite essays that I read at my previous position opened with, "I'm a llama watcher." And I remember the day, the time of day. I remember leaning up in my chair, thinking to myself, go on. And what it was a great kickoff because it was talking about how their bus stop where they went to school where the bus would pick them up was across from a field and there was a llama in the field and it was just the most memorable opening that I've ever experienced. So I am top of the hook, encourage students to say something about themselves, either that nobody can say about themselves or especially with the shared experience on overlap of a lot of 17 and 18-year-olds in a way. Maybe they had a 1 in a million reaction and that incident that happens to a lot had a very particular impact, but really make it your own overall.
Yeah, so I'm going to go quickly through these last few slides because we're running out of time. So we talked a little bit about demonstrated interest earlier. Basically, the important thing to note with that is we can kind of see everything, I would say, within our CRM. So emails that get sent to students, we can see when they opened it, how many times they opened it, the time of day, the date. And so when students are like, I didn't get that email. We can actually see if they did and if they opened it and how they interacted with it, which is always fun. We can see if they've opted out. We can see if they've visited campus. We can see if they've logged into their portal. Another piece of demonstrated interest is obviously visiting campus, obviously engaging with an admissions counselor. So if you do have students who maybe they can't visit campus. So this kind of goes with the third point with the equity dilemma because students don't always have the resources, whether that's time or financial, to be able to visit campuses. And so making sure that they know who to connect with in the admissions office, sending emails, phone calls, virtual Zoom meetings for the schools that really track that, because obviously that is important. I would say with tags, if students have any like unique things about them that maybe we would pay attention to, like legacy, for example, or maybe they're interested in the arts and we offer an art scholarship. Those are things that we do keep track of and can reach out to students with if we have like specific unique opportunities for them, we'll reach out to students with those. And then for schools that say they don't use demonstrated interest, they don't, and they're not. Um, yeah, they're not trying to hide that or like deceive you or something. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so some other details. Pete actually mentioned a lot of this, which is great. So with the transcripts and rigor, so we're looking for trends. So obviously, if a student maybe has like a C or a D on their transcript in ninth grade, like we're looking for upward trajectory, obviously, and growth. It's a little bit more of a red flag if they do in their senior year, but again, the additional information section, the letters of recommendation, they can use all of that to explain any context that needs to be explained in their transcript. So AP versus IB versus dual enrollment, that really is going to depend on the school. I would say in terms of how they evaluate, obviously for credit and things like that, that is school by school. So reaching out to the admissions office for that, but we do pay attention to rigor that we see. For test scores, um, just make sure that students know if a school is saying they're test optional, make sure that they're actually test optional and they're not just saying that, because some schools require test scores for scholarships. So making sure that students are aware of that is really important. Activity lists over time, we would rather see, I would say, depth over, well, you can make the argument either way. But I think quality over quantity is important. So they could have 50 clubs and have only done it for 1 year, but have they been in any leadership positions? Have they done that for 3 or 4 years? And then again, using that additional information section to explain any context that is missing from other parts of their application. Good.
And this question came through in the chat. It says, how many of you track who attends when you visit, or how many of you track who attends when you visit a high school? GCSU does. Pete, I saw UAB does. Does High Point, Heidi?
Yes, we do.
So pretty much if a school provides a QR code or um, has students fill out inquiry cards, that goes in the CRM. Most universities that use Slate as a CRM will track that and have that on file. Okay, and for our last information slide, I think this is our last. Oh, wait, no, we have two more. So we'll try to make these really, really quick. We've got 2 minutes for two slides. So very quickly, red or beige flag. I'm gonna have the speakers thumbs up. Do like a medium hand or thumbs down for red or beige. Okay, so like green will be thumbs up, beige will be flat, and then red will be down, and that'll get us through this really quickly. A student with an obstacle or challenge. I'd say that's a green flag. Pete says beige. Okay, why beige, Pete?
It depends. I think moral of the story, especially with everything we're talking about. But what was the challenge? How did they overcome it? Did they overcome it? Is it still being overcome? There are a couple layers to that I'd have some follow-up questions on right away.
I think that's great to mention. And I will say a lot of students ask us if they should disclose stuff like learning difference. And I think that that also depends. But I think that for us, we like to see that as an explanation for trends in grades. That can be really helpful. A student who is so excited to spend the first 2 years here, going to be a big red flag for all of us. That shows that they're not going to retain a disciplinary note on the application. I'd say it depends. It depends on how bad it is, I think, for all of us. A significant grade with little explanation. So, like a failed grade with little explanation, I think is going to be a red flag for most of us. Heidi, do you want to touch on that one?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on, is this like a ninth grade and that's like an isolated kind of one-off thing versus if they have multiple grades and they don't say any. So I think if it's like a one-off, I would say it's a beige. If it's like, they have multiple from ninth and 10th grade. Yeah.
That's helpful. I'm going to try to keep moving. A shortcoming with deflected blame. So they blame maybe a teacher for a bad grade. I think that that's never a good look for us. A student who uses the wrong university name. I think for schools that care a lot about demonstrated interest, this is a big one. And it's also sloppy. A student who uses AI in their essay. Ooh, I would say beige on this because students can use AI as a tool to maybe help draft, but they shouldn't use it to write their essay. I think we're all in agreement with that. Negative web or social media presence. This is something that not every school looks at, but sometimes universities that are on the fence will look up the student and look at their social media. That can happen. So, and an overbearing parent, I would say I try not to let that impact the student. Pete looks like he does. Pete?
Yeah, not for admissions review overall, but I think just if it's somebody somewhere that you can, I'm thinking of overbearing in the sense that the parent did the application, and it's obvious. I think that's definitely something like, oh, okay, this is a little bit of a red flag.
And we're out of time, but I'm going to run through this really quick if that's okay, Kaylee. Okay, perfect. So other ways that school counselors can help us, really briefly, effective student advocacy. The strongest advocacy for students is specific, it's grounded, it gives clear context, why a student matters, whether or not like a university is a student's number one choice. That information can really help us. Make it easy for us to visit your campus. Smooth visits matter, especially for those of us that are regional. I speak for everyone in Garn when I say that. Clear communication, realistic schedules, access to students, rep visits, scores, school links, whatever you want to put your visits on, go ahead. We will schedule them, but having a visit platform makes it really easy for us. Reaching out with helpful data. If you notice a major shift in your students, like if last year all your students came to GCSU and now none of them went to because all of them came here last year, that's helpful for me to know because then I know that it wasn't my fault, right? That can happen. And so it's really helpful to have that information. And if you have a list of withdrawal students, and you want to get in touch with them about withdrawing their applications with us, that can help us so that we're not sending out communications that they're not receiving or reading. And then also reaching out when you need data. We don't always know what data would be helpful for you or if we're just spamming your inboxes. So if you want a list of incomplete students who haven't finished their application at our schools, or if you want a list of students who submitted applications so that that way you can keep an eye on those, feel free to reach out to us for that information too. We're always happy to help. We don't have a lot of time for final thoughts, but we just want to emphasize like we're college admissions professionals and we care deeply about your students and the work that you do. We take a million things into consideration when reviewing these applications, and you really are the bridge between the students and the opportunities. Your work matters so much more than so many people realize. We're on the same team. We just sit on different sides of the table, but we're here to help. And we thank you and what you do every single day. And if you have any follow-up questions, this is our information. Thank you so much. And thank you for the extra 3 minutes. I'm going to pass it back to Kaylee.
Yes, thank you guys. Y'all did amazing. And I'll just emphasize like all college admissions counselors, but really, really these individuals in Garn are really so helpful. And I struggle with imposter syndrome, so I would always get really nervous to message someone because I was like, I feel like I should know this, or I feel like they're going to think that I'm not a good counselor because I don't know the answer to this question. But if you have that thought, please put it in the back of your head and please reach out to them because they will help you. They'll give guidance, they'll give support that can help with your admin. So I really, really am thankful for you guys and just how accessible y'all are for us. So thank you. All right. I'm going to try to screen share again, Jillian. It may override yours, so let's give it a shot. Let's see. Amy, are you able to see the main page yet?
Not yet. It says you've started screen sharing, but it's not there yet. There,
Okay,
we're there now.
awesome. All right. So we do have a few minutes just before our final session. So during that, feel free to go grab water. We're going to do a couple quick brain breaks, and then we will get started with our final presenter. Amy, I'll pass it off to you.
All right, awesome. So college admission workshops are another amazing resource available to SACAC members. So we wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of them. Free, interactive, and informative, designed for high school students that come from underrepresented and underserved populations. So if you want to learn more about them and apply, you can certainly scan on the QR code. All of this information is also available on the SACAC website. So these are really great in-person events that are designed to do exactly what it says, help students to understand the process, engage in the work with professionals to be able to remove any barriers that may be in their way as it relates to college admissions. So super excited to have this as an opportunity for students that are in the SACAC area. So we wanted to make sure you guys were aware of this.
All right. Our next two plugs are for Summer Seminar and Sweet Tea Tour. So both of these, the registration is going to be opening up pretty soon. I think they're extremely exciting. So Summer Seminar is going to be July 14th through the 17th, and they're going to be touring Belmont, Vanderbilt, and Lipscomb this year. Registration again will open up soon, but you can score the QR code here to be able to see that. And then the co-chairs for Summer Seminar this year are Justin Finsk and Alex LeBlanc. Justin's at the Episcopal School of Baton Rouge, and Alex is at Porter God School. And then our Sweet Tea Tour is going to be June 7th through the 11th. This is quite the tour. So it's going to be a very large jug of sweet tea to get you through it. But they go to 40 different schools. So they're going to be traveling through Memphis, Arkansas, northern Mississippi. Registration is opening soon. I'm sorry, 10 to 15 institutions. About 40 counselors go on this, my bad. However, co-chairs are amazing. So I used to work alongside one of them, Aisha Ward, currently at Vestavia Hills, and then Kyra Young at Canterbury Schools in Florida. It's going to be a really fun time with those two specifically, and then also just to be able to travel through some great institutions all in one opportunity is amazing. So make sure that you sign up for that if you are interested in touring that area of schools. And then Amy will plug our final one.
That's right. Last but certainly not least, the SACAC conference. This is the 60th anniversary. It is in New Orleans this year. So we wanted to certainly make sure you guys have probably heard of it. You are aware of it. Many of you said you are going to it. So the annual conference is the largest professional development event for SACAC. For those of you, particularly maybe on the public school side, who have not had the opportunity to attend, I just wanted to share from my public school experience and lens. I consider this to be one of, if not the best PD that I have ever attended. This conference really, really has helped me over the years to learn so much more about just the college admissions side of things, post-secondary opportunities, really networking connections, both sides of the desk, to then be able to really help support my students as they are making that transition from high school to college, and what they're going to be doing after high school. So I really, really enjoy all of the sessions that are available, and then there's a lot of social opportunity as well to get to know people. And it really then continues carries on into the work that we do each day when you're having, if representatives come into the building and visits and different opportunities and things you want to bring to your students and to your families. So the early bird registration ends February 23rd. And so if you do have the opportunity and have funds available to go, I highly encourage you guys to look into it. So that is that plug. And I wanted to just take a minute. Emma, give us 2 seconds before we introduce you. We've got Darren Morgan on, who just wanted to pop on and say hi. Darren, are you going to pop on again a second and say
Hey
hi?
everybody. Hey
Go ahead,
everybody. I
Darren.
just
We'll turn it
wanted
over to you
to
real quick.
thank you all on behalf of SAI and the rest of the team. This has been a great event, great workshop. From Anthea to Jay to the members of GARN and especially to Amy and Kaylee for putting on a great event. Hope to see you all at conference. And remember that the Council Participation Fund just was released today the application for it was released today for Sweet Tea Tour, dry run, and a few other events. So if you're a public school counselor, CBO counselor, please take advantage of those and apply. It's a great way to make those programs affordable. All right, hope to see you all at conference. Take care.
Thank you. Okay, and last but not least, we thought a great way to wrap up our drive-in workshop today would be to change focus a little bit and focus some on the mental health side of things with our students. Kaylee and I, when we were planning, we're really thinking about, okay, so we're going to provide you guys with some great information and resources as it relates to college planning, post-secondary options, research, and talking through what families and students are dealing with. But we thought we would be remiss if we did not then provide you with like, okay, now how do we help them? Because everybody's got a lot on their minds. And so we're excited to introduce you to Emma Keeley. She is with Therapeutic Recovery Network. And she is really going to speak with you guys today, particularly about older teenagers. And I think Jay kind of mentioned this, a ninth grade student and a 12th grade student are very different beasts. And so we're super excited to learn from Emma about this big transitions and big feelings. So Emma, we will turn it over to you. Thank you for joining us today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Amy and Kaylee, for having me here today. I'm very excited to chat with you all. And I know it's probably been a long day for a lot of you, so I appreciate you hanging in there with me and letting me kind of take the last slot. So just give me one moment and I'm going to just share my screen. Okay. All right, just a thumbs up. Is everyone able to see my screen okay?
Yes, we can see it. It doesn't look like it's in the presenter mode just yet. Just
Oh,
so,
really?
yes.
Okay, it might just be lagging just a little bit because it looks like it's in presenter mode for me. Does it look okay now?
Let's see. I think you might be good to move through. Amy, is it working on your end?
It's not in present mode yet.
Okay, let me just see one more time. So sorry, y'all. Let's see. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, it looks like every time I try to go into presenter mode, it is stopping my screen share. So let me just
You're
see.
good. We can still see it if you move through the different slides, but I know you had
Okay,
mentioned some
great.
animation like that may be a little
Sure.
wonky for it, but we can still see it. It's just not in the
Okay.
presenter
Okay, yeah, if that's okay, I might keep doing that because it looks like every time I go into presenter mode, it just kicks me right out of screen sharing. So
mode. No worries. You're so
I'll go
good.
right ahead and do that. Awesome. Okay. Well, as Amy said, thank you all so much for being here today. And so my presentation today is going to be on big changes and big feelings. So just before I get started, just wanted to thank you all so much for the work that you do. I know that all of you are really our front lines. As an outpatient therapist, I have such a very deep appreciation for our school counselors. I only see my clients typically once or twice a week, and so I know you guys see our students every single day. So just greatly, greatly appreciative for the work that you do. And so with that said, we'll get started. Okay. Okay, and here is the agenda for today. So I'm going to briefly kind of just introduce myself and introduce the work that I do, a little bit of background just so that you guys can get to know me. Then we'll talk a little bit about what emerging adulthood is, right? It's a really complicated term for a period of time that is really just, the teenage and young adult years. And then I'll talk a little bit about some current mental health trends that I'm sure you are all seeing kind of on the ground day to day. And then also signs to look out for, right? Because I think it's important to go over not only what trends are we seeing, but how can we spot them, right? Because I think, the signs
signs, warning signs aren't always extremely obvious. And then, of course, kind of just rounding out with talking about what can we do, right? How can we support students with their mental health? How can outside outpatient counselors work together with school counselors? And so, apologies because I did have some animations, but it's looking like if I share it this way, I can't share them. So we can just pretend. Um, so again, like I said, my name is Emma. I have my master's in mental health counseling and I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Georgia. I work at Therapeutic Recovery Network, which is a private practice in Cumming, Georgia. But I actually live in Columbus, Georgia myself, so I see all of my clients virtually. And I am a child and adolescent therapist by training, so the majority of my clients are between the ages of 8 and 25, I would say. So this is a period of development that I work with almost every single day. I see my middle schoolers, my high schoolers, and my college students. And just a little bit of background, I was born and raised in Pleasantville, New York, but I've been living in the South for about 3 years now. I really love it down here. Y'all are great. And I've started saying y'all. And I received my bachelor's degree from Salve Virginia University, which is a little Catholic school up on the water in Newport, Rhode Island. And then I then received my master's degree from Boston College in Boston, Massachusetts. I am ashamed to say, a little bit ashamed to say that I'm a big Patriots fan. A little bit tough to say after the Super Bowl, but still a true fan. And then a fun fact that I always share is I've actually lived, well, coming next month, I will have lived in 7 states in the last 10 years. My husband's in the military, so I've popped around quite a lot and had the chance to meet a lot of wonderful people. And then in my free time, a little bit about me. I love hanging out with my husband. We have 2 dogs, as you can see in the bottom of my screen. Our chocolate lab is Tucker, and then our Great Pyrenees is Birdie. And I love being active, so running, lifting weights, anything like that. But enough about me. So now we'll talk a little bit about emerging adulthood, right? So we would define emerging adulthood as a period of time roughly between the ages of 16 and 25, right? Where there's a lot of different core themes that are coming up, right? Everything from identity construction to emotional intensity without kind of full-blown emotional regulation quite yet. And lastly, kind of just feeling stuck between dependence and interdependence, right? And so when we think about identity construction, I think the biggest question that a lot of our students are asking is, who am I, right? And that's a question that I think a lot of us struggle with at different points throughout our life. But I think in this period of development, this is such a big question, right? Because students have so much of their lives ahead of them. I think they're still really trying to figure out who they are and how their beliefs align with who they want to be. And so this is a really, really big time for development. And so, of course, I'm sure as many of you see, this is also a period of time where students are really trying to figure out how much or how little they should be relying on the people around them, right? And really trying to find a good balance between, you know, forming these deep, meaningful connections with people in their lives, but not forming them so that there's a dependence, right? So this is a really big time where students are trying to parse out, how much support do I need from my teachers? How much support do I need from my counselors? How much support do I need from my parents and my friends? And there's so many different avenues of support. And so students are starting to kind of navigate that kind of journey into independence. And so lastly, like I was saying too, emotional intensity without complete regulation. So this is a period of time where there's a lot going on for our teenagers, right? There's a lot of brain chemistry changing, there's a lot of hormonal changes. And so this can often lead to some really, really big emotions without the kind of complete emotional toolbox that they need to handle those really big emotions just yet. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But just quickly, I wanted to take a poll. And was just curious, in one word, what emotion are you seeing come up most frequently among your students right now? Whether it's, anxiety or stress, overwhelm, anger, whatever it might be. And I'm going to just pop into the chat quickly so I can see what everyone's responding. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of anxiety, confusion, and anxiety. Absolutely. Right. And I think when we think about anxiety coming up for our students nowadays, there's so many reasons why that might be the case, right? Overstimulation, overwhelming anxiety about everything, right? I think that's absolutely a thing for our students nowadays. And if we think about all the different stressors that they're facing, right? Between, college applications, taking, the SAT or the ACT, deciding who they want to be, navigating friendships, navigating the current kind of socio-political climate, right? And kind of thinking about social media and how the exposure to all of these stressors is almost nonstop, right? A lot of teens don't kind of put their phone down when they get home. And so there's kind of just a constant, barrage of stressors that are in their face all the time. So, it seems like a lot of what you guys are seeing in schools is very, very much mirroring what I'm seeing kind of in the outpatient setting. And so to kind of just briefly cover some trends that we're seeing, right? Thinking about the fact that About 40% of high school students have reported persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness and so these are all statistics for 2023, I should mention. However, I'm sure these are probably even more, applicable nowadays. 20% of students have seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year, and 16% have made a plan for suicide. So these statistics are all just kind of smaller snapshots of a greater trend that we've been seeing over the past couple of years with, young adult mental health. And so suicide is, in fact, the leading cause of death for teenagers nowadays, right? And I think a lot of people, when they're asked that question, what do you think is the leading cause of death for teenagers, right? They might think, car crashes, medical events, substance use, whatever it might be. But it's suicide, right? And I think when we all think of that and the facts and that that is the case, it's incredibly sobering, right? To think of, the fact that so many teens are kind of feeling like they're in a place where their lives are so hopeless or they're feeling so overwhelmed and anxious about their futures that they don't really see a way out of it. Um, and I think too, I would be remiss if I did not mention that I think the COVID pandemic has had such a large impact on mental health, right? Because if we think about this as almost, teenage suicidality and teenage mental health kind of almost being like a secondary pandemic to the original, COVID pandemic. Because if we think about kind of our teens' current days, right? Thinking about what age they were when COVID first took place, they were being kind of pulled out of school, right? Very, very strongly isolated from their peers at a period of development where it's essential to be around peers, right? Where it's essential to be kind of making those relationships and navigating conflict, and kind of just having that social interaction. And so I think we see this really, really kind of great, steep increase, right, in mental health issues in young adults nowadays because of those impacts from COVID. And so I think that's a really important thing to pay attention to. Kind of navigating this new post-COVID landscape with these teens, right, that did have a very, very large kind of impact take place during a very formative developmental time. Um, and so just to talk about, and I know I've kind of, touched on some of this already, but to talk about some factors that influence young adult mental health, right? So one of the biggest ones being social media use, right? And if we think about a lot of us, if we think back to our old high school days or our middle school days, I can't say that mine was significantly impacted by social media, right? And I think a lot of us would probably say the same thing. But for teens nowadays, this is such a big part of their experience, right? And I know that a lot of different parents have, different roles and different philosophies at home about kind of when teens are allowed to use social media, what they're allowed to use. But I think the hardest thing is it just becomes harder and harder to implement those roles with teens at home because of how popular the use of social media and phones are. Um, and I think one of the hard things is too, every single day there are new apps coming out, new social media platforms coming out. And, the more social media platforms there are, the more teens are being exposed to new trends, right? New trends that a lot of the time can be incredibly dangerous, right? Whether that be like a very risky trend or a trend around mental health, right? Teens are being exposed to things that they would have never been exposed to, right? 10 or 15 years ago. And even kind of thinking about that, kind of talking about how suicidal contagion can sometimes take place, right? Where students will kind of hear about other teens taking their lives or losing their lives by suicide. And maybe it's something that they hadn't really considered before, hadn't learned much more about. But now, at the tips of their fingers, they have, a plethora of information that they can kind of use to kind of delve more deeply into that world, right? Which is something that we don't want, of course. And then kind of tying into social media too, right? Like overexposure to socio-political stressors. So thinking about, teenagers nowadays, they're on Instagram, they're on TikTok, they're on Twitter, Snapchat, right? All these different social media platforms, which aren't inherently bad or evil in and of themselves. But I think a lot of the content that teens are exposed to can be incredibly, incredibly damaging, right? And I'm sure a lot of us, frankly, as adults, we see the effects of that too, right? But I think the difference is as adults, a lot of us have those kind of like coping skills and the emotional toolbox built up to help us regulate and help us really understand the kind of content that we're taking in. Whereas teenagers, they're still kind of working on that toolbox, right? So it can be a lot more damaging for them, but of course it's damaging for us too. Um, of course, a really big one, I know there's been a lot of talk about this today, I'm sure, are impending changes, right? So college, choosing what college to go to, moving away, leaving friends and family. And I know students make all kinds of different decisions about how close or not close they want to stay to home. But of course, regardless, it's a really, really big decision, right? Starting new with new people and new professors and greater stressors. And so, of course, this is a really, really big, kind of factor that influences mental health for our high schoolers too. And then, of course, relational stressors, right? If we all kind of think back to our own high school experience, it's a time that can have a lot of conflict, right? And a lot of change, friend group dynamics change, and relationships change. And maybe, we start dating and, our family relationships might change. And so all of these stressors together, right, they're different for every student and unique for every student. And for that reason, they can cause a lot of anxiety, right? A lot of stress, a lot of overwhelm. And so this is a really important thing to think about for our students is what's going on at home, right? What's going on at home, what's going on in their interpersonal relationships, and how might that be impacting their mental health. And then, of course, academic pressure, right? And I know you all know this, junior and senior year of high school, I would say two of the most, if not the most, academically pressuring years of a student's life. Kind of setting their sights for where they want to attend college, really trying to kind of meet those grades, SAT scores, ACT scores, right? All of the application stress. There's a lot of pressure for our students, right? And of course, we kind of feel a lot of empathy for that. But I think, some students can be more susceptible to anxiety around academic pressure than others. And then, of course, I think it's important to mention as well that high school is a time where a lot of students start to experiment with illicit substances, right? So parties are happening. Maybe some parents are providing students with, alcohol or drugs, at home or whatever it might be. And so, of course, substance use, and especially if it does kind of progress into addiction, can seriously, seriously impact, a youth's mental health. And so, all of these factors together make the young adult years very, very tumultuous ones, right? And a years full of change. And so, just to talk briefly about kind of some of the most common, presenting concerns that I see in my office. So, I do work predominantly with anxiety disorders and OCD. So I see a lot of very high performing perfectionistic students, right? So these are students where you wouldn't necessarily know that they were anxious unless you really, really talk to them about it and probe them about it a little bit. A lot of students use kind of hyper responsibility and high performance to mask very, very severe anxiety, kind of under the tip of the iceberg. And so it's always worth checking in with your very high performing students just to see how are they feeling, right? Are they feeling really anxious? Are they having trouble sleeping? Are they having trouble eating, right? And just kind of looking for some less obvious signs, right, that they might be struggling with that anxiety. Um, I do see a lot of my high school students struggling with interpersonal relationships, right? Whether that be conflict with a friend, with their first breakup, right? This is a time in life where we're navigating a lot of new experiences, right? So maybe we started dating someone and we broke up, right? And it's our first breakup and we're not really sure how to navigate it. And then something that I see that I think is really very much worth mentioning too is I see a lot of students actually feeling left out due to their choice to resist peer pressure rather than to engage with it. So students who are choosing not to drink, not to smoke when their peers might be making that choice and feeling really, really left out or really judged as a result of that. And then something that I think is very, very important to mention too is high school happens to coincide with the age and developmental period where we first start to see mental health conditions show their first signs. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second, but just a quick poll. I just want you all to kind of reflect back on your own experience with your mental health or just mental health in general in high school. And I want you to kind of let me know what one word is that you would use to describe it. And then we'll kind of get moving. Insecure. Absolutely. I think insecurity is a really, really big, very common emotion for a lot of high school students. Fake, volatile, these are all great. I think these really just sum up kind of what it is like to be a high schooler, right? Navigate kind of the emotional landscape of high school. Confusing, right? I think that's a really great word as well. And thank you all for sharing. And so I think a lot of the words that you all use very much echo kind of what our students are experiencing nowadays. I say someone said agitated with peers. I think that's really common as well, right? Just feeling really frustrated, trying to figure out where we fit in amongst our peers. And so thank you all for sharing. And so just kind of to segue, and I know the title I put here is The Perfect Storm, but I mean that very facetiously. The average age of onset for most mental health disorders is around 14, right? So for a lot of our students, that's going to correlate with their freshman year of high school. And so that is when we start to see a lot of the first signs of mental health conditions sign up, right? Show up. So we might start to see, a student's first panic attack, right? Or their first depressive episode, their first episode of mania, right? And so keeping an eye out for that is really, really important. And for a lot of mental health conditions, symptoms typically emerge anytime between the ages of 14 and 24. So when we think about what that coincides with, kind of just in terms of big life changes, we're talking all of high school and almost all of college, right? Which is a time that's already just completely fraught with change, which can just make the change even more difficult. And adolescence also does bring changes to the HPA axis, which is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Excuse me, I always screw that up. And it's a part, or I should say, it's kind of just a connection in the body that kind of helps regulate our stress response, right? And I'm sure you've all heard of cortisol. It's a hormone that helps regulate our stress. And so as the HPA axis changes in adolescence, it can amplify the body's reactivity to cortisol, right? And so the more that the body is reacting to cortisol, the greater and grander we're going to see these stress responses be, right? Which can lead to panic attacks, anxiety, chronic stress, overwhelm, all of those things. And so elevated levels of cortisol affect the prefrontal cortex as well, right? So the prefrontal cortex is a part of the frontal lobe in the brain. So it's basically right up here. And it's very implicated in decision making, right? And planning and all of these right, different processes that we need to use when we're in the college decision making process, right? Future planning and organizing applications and writing essays. Well, the prefrontal cortex is very, very, very important in all of those different tasks. But it's also very, very important for emotional regulation as well, right? So as we are kind of navigating, conflict with our peers and breakups and stressors and all these different things, well, we really need good emotional regulation, right? And I think if the prefrontal cortex is being kind of changed or impacted by hormonal changes or chronic stress, it can make it a lot harder to navigate all those different experiences. And so, one of the things that I hear most often from my teens is a frustration about being told to just calm down. And I don't think that is at all being said to them by counselors. I think a lot of the time it's coming from, sources online, it's coming from friends, it's coming from parents, right? And teens come in so frustrated because they're like, Emma, I can't just calm down, right? Why don't they get it? I'm like, I hear you, I get it, right? And so the reason for this, though, right? Because I think a lot of us were able to kind of look back and reflect on our own high school experiences as adults and be like, okay, well, maybe I could have handled that a little bit better. Maybe I could have used this coping skill instead to kind of be a little bit healthier about this. But the truth is, right, our teens don't have that foresight in that period of their life. And so teens are typically experiencing one, if not all of the following, right? So very highly reactive HPA axis, right? So we're thinking more cortisol, which is our stress hormone. So more anxiety, more stress, more overwhelm. They're also experiencing rapid hormonal shifts, right? So estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, those hormones are all fluctuating and spiking, which can certainly impact kind of the effects of, different emotional experiences for our teens. And then additionally, there's a really important process that takes place for our teens in, the 16 to 24 range, right? Called pruning. And basically all that means is the brain, it's essentially use it or lose it, right? So the brain is really trying to figure out what neuronal connections are we using all the time and how can we keep those? And then what ones are we not using very often and how can we kind of get rid of those? Um, and so, given that this is happening, right, if we think about biologically how many changes are happening for our teens, it's no wonder they feel like they can't just calm down, right? And they can't. And so, to kind of just talk about signs to look out for. So, I know you've all probably seen this before, and I'm sure I'm kind of repeating a lot of things that you all know already, but I think it's important to talk about regardless. So, just some signs to look out for in your teens, right? When they come into your office, when you see them in the hallways, when you hear from their teachers, really, really looking for social withdrawal, right? And especially if it happens to be uncharacteristic social withdrawal. So if we're thinking of our students who are typically, they're hanging out with a big friend group, right? Or they're always smiling and waving to people in the hall. Well, if you see that teen go from that very kind of bubbly, an energetic social teen to someone who's a little bit more withdrawn, right? Maybe we're not saying hi to people in the hallway anymore, and maybe we're not spending time around friends. That's a really, really important sign to look out for that a teen might be struggling with their mental health. In addition, paying attention to any sharp or drastic changes in academic performance. So if you're seeing a student who's typically a very high performer and all of a sudden their grades start to slip, and it doesn't always necessarily have to be, a giant change. They might not go from being an A student to a C student, right? But that A might start to turn into Bs, right? And those Bs may gradually turn into Cs. So really looking into that, right? And asking the teen, what's going on for them and kind of what might be leading to that change in academic performance. Risk-taking behavior, of course, is a really, really big one as well, right? So this is for our teens that are engaging in any kind of risky behavior, whether that be, using illicit substances or driving, recklessly or kind of making, destructive or conflict-driven decisions in their interpersonal relationships. These are all things to look out for. I know it's hard because a lot of these things take place out of school, outside of kind of, school time. But when these things are taking place, or we hear that they're taking place, taking them seriously and really trying to get serious with teens about, what is it that's going on and kind of what's leading that to happen. Um, and lastly, drastic changes in appearance, right? So if you have a teen who's normally very well kept, they show up with their outfit a certain way, their hair a certain way, and then gradually over time, right, they start to dress differently, right? Maybe they start to dress in very oversized clothing, they stop taking care of their hair, maybe a girl who used to like her do her makeup stops doing her makeup, and all of those things alone aren't warning signs, right? But all of them together could signal, that there might be a problem, right? If a student's feeling really depressed, they might start putting a lot of effort into their physical appearance. They might start dressing differently. They might not really have energy for personal hygiene, so they might start to look a little bit different. So paying attention to all of these signs, in addition to all of the ones that I've mentioned here. So all of the signs that I mentioned in the previous slide are, I shouldn't say obvious, right? They're a little bit easier to spot, but not all signs are. And so there are some other signs that I felt like were really important to go over. And so thinking about students who are overperforming, right? A lot of the clients that I see in outpatient therapy are using, overperformance and perfectionism as a tool to mask very, very severe anxiety under the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg, like I had said earlier. So these might look like students who are taking on way too much involvement, right? I'm sure we all know students like this. Students who are straight A students and they're three-sport athletes and they're in theater and they're in clubs and they're doing all kinds of wonderful things. And that's all great, right? And I think these are the students that often slip under the radar because they are doing so well, right? And on paper, everything looks great, right? And their college application looks great. But I think oftentimes these students need some support, right? And they need some attention. They need people to ask them, hey, are you okay, right? What elements of self-care are you giving up to make sure that you can fulfill all of these responsibilities? Um, Another thing that I think is really, important and something that we see very often with a lot of students are repeated psychosomatic complaints or nurse's office visits, right? So these might look like students who are complaining really often of nausea, headaches, dizziness, any kind of physical symptom. And students that find themselves in the nurse's office a lot of the time, this can oftentimes be pretty indicative of some severe anxiety, right? Like a lot of our students who are experiencing very high anxiety might struggle to go to class, right? They might have anxiety about just being at school. And I think for a lot of teenagers, this can manifest physically. And yes, it's manifesting emotionally as well. But right, they're telling the adults in their lives, oh, well, I just have a stomach ache, right? I just have a headache. I keep getting, I feel nauseous every time I show up to school. And so really looking out for these students and considering that it might not just be a way for them to skip class or get out of school or get out of responsibilities, but rather this might be a sign that they're really, really struggling with their mental health. And lastly, this is one that I really, really like to talk about because I think it's not always very obvious. Any kind of very abnormal cheery behavior in teens that previously appeared depressed. And so the reason why this is really, really important to pay attention to is sometimes if we have a student that's very, very depressed and they are starting to seriously consider suicide or they made a plan for suicide, oftentimes the relief that they feel from making that plan can lead to them seeming okay all of a sudden. They seem happy. Maybe they're sharing some personal belongings with friends and they're, being kind of, overly touchy-feely and lovey with their friends, right? And that might all seem great, but sometimes that can be a signal that a teen has made a decision about what they want to do with their lives. And so I always, always urge, school counselors, teachers to really, really pay attention to this at school because it can absolutely be a warning sign that there might be something serious going on with a student. And just a quick poll. I was curious to see kind of what you're all seeing on the front lines. What are some other signs of declining mental health that you have noticed in your students over the past couple of years? And I'll give everyone a moment just to type. I know that might take a moment. School refusal, absolutely. Stop coming to school. So it looks like school refusal is a really big one. Absolutely. And a school refusal is something that I work with very, very often in outpatient therapy. A lot of my very anxious teens struggle with school refusal. And I think that can be one of the most difficult, issues to navigate with teens, right? Because it's not as simple as just forcing them to be there, right? It's really about uncovering whatever anxiety lies beneath that school refusal in the first place. And that's why, as an outpatient therapist, I really, really appreciate getting to work in tandem with my school counselors to figure out a really good, gradual, comfortable process to get students feeling less anxious when they are at school. So thank you all for sharing. And then I know I don't have a whole lot of time left, so I'll try to get through this as quickly as I can. Um, and so I'll go through this one quickly because it's not maybe as pertinent as my other slides. But as you all know, right, you all act as a very, very vital source of emotional regulation, guidance, and stability for students who might not have that at home or might not be getting that for their friends. And all of my, clients that I talk to, they're so, so highly appreciative for their school counselors when it comes to navigating, the college admissions process, but also when it comes to emotional regulation at school, right? I know a lot of times y'all might be kind of the first line of contact for students that are experiencing a lot of dysregulation at school, whether that be anxiety or stress, depression. And so that can be incredibly, incredibly helpful for these students. And so to briefly kind of go over just some helpful emotional regulation skills, and with that all being said, I know that like collaboration with an outpatient therapist is of course incredibly helpful, but in the moment, right? I'm assuming like being a school counselor, right? You might be like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do with the student in the moment, right? Because they really, really need my help. Um, maybe I can't call up their outpatient therapist right now to help out. And so these are some brief emotional regulation skills that could be really, really helpful to implement in the office with students. So grounding work is a really, really big one. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the 5 4 3 2 1 method. And on the next slide, I'll share kind of a quick graphic if anyone wants to save that. It's really, really helpful for kind of bringing students out of intense anxiety or out of really any kind of intense emotion and kind of back into, the present, kind of allowing them to kind of regulate in the present. Dialectical behavioral therapy is a really, really big one. I'm sure you've all heard of this as well. I love DBT for teens because it has a lot of really great acronyms that are really easy to remember. So I'll go over TIP in just a second, but it's a really, really great set of skills to use with teens to help for emotional regulation. Of course, breath work can be really helpful. However, I have learned as a therapist that not all teens are receptive to this, and that's okay. I think a lot of teens have an aversion to even hearing about breath work because they're like, I don't want someone else to tell me to just take a deep breath, right? And that's not really not what breath work is about. It's a much more intentional, structured process, but of course it can be really helpful if a teen is open to it. Um, a way of kind of implementing breath work with students at school could be box breathing, and essentially all that is you breathe in for 4, you hold for 4, you let it out for 4, and then you repeat the process again after 4 seconds. And so it can be really helpful for students to, visualize kind of a box if they close their eyes in their mind and breathe along with that box. Meditation is also a really, really great resource. The great thing about social media and phones is that we have a lot of access to these resources nowadays. So YouTube, Spotify, the Headspace app, they all make meditation so highly accessible for our students. And so I always recommend that school counselors kind of use these as a first line for students. When they come into the office feeling really, really dysregulated, sometimes this can help them get back to class or help them feel re-regulated before they head back to the rest of their day. And lastly, journaling, of course, can be very helpful. And I'll just quickly show some graphics. This is a 5 4 3 2 1 grounding technique. So for any of you who want to screenshot this and save this, feel free. It's one that I use all the time with my students to help them ground themselves and help them, ground their emotions. And then this is the tip exercise that I was talking about from DBT. This is a really, really great one. I even recommend sometimes that school counselors keep like a little jar of sour candy in their office for a student that might be having a panic attack or needs like a really quick emotional fix. That sour candy can help students ground themselves very, very quickly. And I'll skip the quick poll because I know we're pretty much up on time. um, and so just lastly, I just really quickly wanted to cover when to make outside referrals. So as a therapist, an outpatient therapist, I am so highly appreciative of my school counselors. I love to collaborate with them as much as I can, keeping an open line of contact, text, email, calls, whatever it is, just so that we're making sure that a student really has that wraparound support that they need, both in school and outside of school. So here are just some signs that it might be time to kind of start making some outside referrals. So if a student's visits to the guidance office become very very frequent. And I will add as well, the nurse's office would definitely be a place where I would kind of keep an eye out for frequent visits as well. If a student is experiencing performance or functioning related difficulties, so if you see a sharp downturn in grades, any kind of very uncharacteristic behavior, whether that be with academics, clubs, sports, anything like that. Or lastly, of course, a student's distress does not improve with basic coping skills. So if you're trying those coping skills that I listed on the slide, a couple slides ago, if that is not working, it might be time to kind of get that student connected to an outpatient therapist. And so I know I'm a little bit over time, so I apologize, but thank you all so much for having me today. I'm just so greatly appreciative for the work that you do. And even when I was in high school myself, just so greatly appreciative of my school counselors. So thank you all. And if any of you have any questions, feel free to either email me, reach out to our practice. I see clients virtually, so I'm very much, on my phone, emailing, whatever you need. So feel free to give me a shout with any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emma. That was really great information. Such a great way to wrap things up. And give us some great background information about the students that we're working with, helping us to understand some of why they do what they do, and some great strategies for supporting them. So we really appreciate you and appreciate you coming on, joining us today.
Absolutely. Yes. And thank you both so much for having me. And thank you all for sticking with me through your last presentation.
No, it was great. It was a great way. It was a perfect wrap up.
I'm
So
so glad. Thank you so much.
thank you.
No. So we just wanted to take the second to thank you guys again for sticking with us this afternoon. Hopefully this was really great resources for you guys. We know you're doing a lot. You're wearing a ton of hats. And if you're going to legislative day tomorrow, you will be out of the office or virtually unavailable as well. So we are very appreciative. And so, Emma, thank you for your time. And if you guys have questions for either me or Amy, or if you'd like to get in contact with either of our presenters, any of our presenters, feel free to shoot us an email or reach out to SACAC, and I know they can always get that information to us as well. This event is usually always offered in the spring each year, but we're always looking to see if we will either go virtual, in person, or even collab with a different event as well in the future. So know that we're always open to suggestions, and we're just very appreciative for you guys as well. Amy, any final words?
Nope, just thank you guys. Thank you for hanging on there with us. We hope you guys learned something today and something new that you can take away. And I, again, encourage you to bring a new member into SACAC. We're always looking to grow the organization. And we really appreciate you guys joining us today. So thank you.
And hopefully we'll see you in New Orleans.
Yes.
Yes. Y'all have a
Bye,
great
guys.
night.